Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301, Successfully Squeezed Out. Well, the performance of Oscar and the 8th Army really shocked me. However, this is also a very good thing for the Empire. William II showed a smile on his face. Qin Tian and the 8th Army's victory on the Eastern Front made William II very satisfied. At the same time, what made him more satisfied was undoubtedly Qin Tian's next deployment for the Eastern Front. The combination of military means and political means has completely brought down Russia, so that Germany no longer has to worry about this powerful enemy in the East. If Qin Tian's plan is successful, it will give Germany an advantage in this war. This also made William II very fortunate to have chosen Qin Tian to be the crown prince of the empire. Otherwise, it might not be what it is now. Even if Crown Prince William came to his senses now, whether William II would ask Qin Tian to return the position of Crown Prince to Crown Prince William is another matter. After all, Qin Tian's performance in the position of Crown Prince is more than a little bit better than that of Crown Prince William back then. Qin Tian's political wisdom and ability to deal with problems are obviously more sophisticated than Crown Prince William. It can be said that William II obviously believed that Qin Tian was the best candidate for the Crown Prince. Little Malky saw the smile on William II's face, and his heart sank even more. He knew that William II's attitude towards Qin Tian had fundamentally changed. If he wanted to continue fighting Qin Tian, King William II would not give him any more support. As soon as he thought of this, little Maoki made a new decision. Your Majesty, my relationship with the Crown Prince was very tense because of my different political views. Now, I understand that everything is because I'm too short-sighted. I'm willing to reconcile with the Crown Prince, but I'm worried that the Crown Prince will not forgive me. So, I hope His Majesty can intervene. Little Maoki said sincerely. King William II was taken aback for a moment, as if he couldn't believe it. After all, he was also very clear about little Maoki's character. In this case, it doesn't seem like little Maoki can say it. However, if the conflict between Zhao Maoki and Qin Tian can really be resolved, that would be a good thing. Okay, I will tell Oscar. I believe that Oscar is not the kind of person with a small belly. Little Maoki smiled. Your Majesty, I regret the current predicament on the Western Front. Due to some reasons, we failed to defeat the British and French coalition forces on the Western Front as we wished. However, I believe that we will have a chance next time. What we need to do now is to let the troops rest and store combat supplies. When the time is right, we will launch a big war. I believe that by then we will be able to defeat the British and French allied forces, take Paris, and defeat France. Zhao Maoki continued. He wanted to use this method to convince William II that he could still lead the German army to victory. It's just that, to little Maoki's regret, William II didn't seem to give him the response he wanted. I need to think carefully about the matter on the Western Front. However, I suggest you take a break first. You have been busy with this war since before the war started. I think you should take a good rest. If this is the case, it will be good for your body. William II said tactfully. He believed that little Maoki should be able to hear what he meant. Little Maoki opened his mouth, wanting to say that he is in good health and doesn't need to rest at all. However, in the end he still couldn't say anything. He knew that William II had made up his mind to replace him by saying so. Let him go to rest. This is just to save face for him. If he didn't know what to do, William II might not be so easy to talk to. At that time, it will definitely lose face. Little Maoki knows how to choose. If he accepts William II's suggestion, the friendship between him and William II may continue. Otherwise, their friendship would have to come to an end. Yes, Your Majesty, I do feel very tired recently. Therefore, it is undoubtedly the best to take a rest. However, if Your Majesty needs it, you can call me at any time. For the sake of the Empire, I'm willing to continue fighting. Little Maoki said. King William II nodded, and a trace of sentimentality flashed across his face. The trouble between him and little Maoki made him feel uncomfortable. Your Majesty, if there is nothing else, then I will take my leave. Little Maoki said. Okay, go back and have a good rest. William II said. Little Moltke left the office of William II. His back was full of bleakness and loneliness. For him, losing the position of Chief of Staff is obviously very uncomfortable. William II also remained silent for a long time as he watched the back of little Maoki leaving. Hey, let's find a chance to talk to Oscar in the future. Don't he embarrass little Maoki anymore. After all, we are friends, and we can't leave no sympathy. William II sighed. Let Qin Tian not trouble little Maoki. This is the only way William II can help little Maoki for the sake of friends. Little Maoki went to find William II. Of course he couldn't hide it from Qin Tian. Qin Tian got the news almost when little Maoki entered the office of William II. At that time, Qin Tian was discussing the next battle with von Falkenhayn. Now, it is almost a foregone conclusion that von Falkenhayn will take over as Chief of Staff. However, after von Falkenhayn came to power, he must come up with a plan that is beneficial to Germany. Otherwise, it would not only be difficult to do business with William II. At the same time, I can't explain to those generals. In that case, it would not be so easy for von Falkenhayn to secure his position as Chief of the General Staff. Your Highness, little Maoki went to find His Majesty. Will there be any accidents? Von Falkenhayn was a little worried. Qin Tian shook his head. He knew William II's character. Once he made up his mind, it would be difficult to change. What's more, little Maoki's performance in this war was indeed too bad. William II would never allow Maoki to lead Germany to victory in this war, since he was the Chief of the General Staff. Don't worry, everything is a foregone conclusion. No matter how hard Zhao Maoki works, nothing will change. Qin Tian said confidently. In this case, it would be the best. Von Falkenhayn was relieved a lot. The next day, Wilhelm II issued an order to remove Moltke from the post of Chief of General Staff, and the Minister of War von Falkenhayn would also serve as Chief of General Staff. Chapter 302, Defending from the West and Attacking from the East. Falkenhayn, from now on, you will also serve as the Chief of Staff. I hope that under your leadership, the Imperial Army can defeat powerful enemies, help the German Empire, and win this war. William II said. The most important reason why William II made up his mind to replace Moltke was to win the war. In this war, Germany did everything possible. If the war is lost, the consequences will be disastrous. Therefore, this battle must be won. Little Moltke's previous performance was too bad, which also made William II believe that little Moltke would not be able to lead the German army to victory. Then, he can only place his hope on other people, and von Falkenhayn was his chosen candidate. On the one hand, von Falkenhayn is the Minister of War and most qualified to take over as Chief of the General Staff. On the other hand, von Falkenhayn's ability is also very good. In addition, there is another point, that is, the relationship between von Falkenhayn and Qin Tian is very good. William II no longer wanted to see the strength of the German army affected by the tense relationship between the Chief of Staff and the Crown Prince. Such a lesson, once is enough. William II does not want to do it again. Yes, Your Majesty, I must do my best to lead the German Empire army to defeat the powerful enemy and win the final victory of the war. Von Falkenhayn said excitedly. After waiting for so many years, he finally got his wish. You know, the struggle between him and little Maoki has been going on for a long time. Before, he was always suppressed by little Maoki, but now, he finally succeeded in squeezing out little Maoki and became the #1 man in the Imperial Army. This made von Falkenhayn very excited and at the same time very grateful to Qin Tian for his help. Otherwise, where would he be today? King William II nodded, and he really hoped that the situation of the battle would change because of this. Falkenhayn, do you have any plans for the Western Front? William II asked impatiently. Eastern Front. After Qin Tian's report, William II was not worried at all. What he was most worried about was still the Western Front. If there is no breakthrough on the Western Front, Germany will not be able to win the war. Your Majesty, after more than a month of fighting, our army has tried its best on the Western Front. The troops are very exhausted, and the war supplies are almost exhausted. We need time to rest. Otherwise, we are unable to launch a large-scale offensive. Falkenhayn said. William II nodded. Given the current situation of the German army on the Western Front, it is indeed impossible to launch a large-scale offensive. Launching an attack rashly is very likely to fail again. In that case, the consequences will be even more serious. So, when do you plan to launch the next attack? William II asked. Your Majesty, it is already September. After we finish our rest, the cold winter will come. We must prepare for the winter of our troops, to avoid non-combat attrition due to the weather. In addition, launch an offensive in winter. If it is not used, the loss of the troops will also be great. Therefore, we believe that the Western Front will launch an offensive again, at least until next spring. Von Falkenhayn said. Next spring. William II couldn't help but frowned. Although, he believes that von Falkenhayn's analysis is still very reliable. However, there is still half a year before next spring. While this gave the Germans enough rest time, didn't it also give the enemy time to breathe? When Germany launched the war, France's military reforms were not completed, and neither was its mobilization. That's why Germany was able to win such a big victory on the battlefield. If the French are given another half a year, their mobilization will definitely be completed. At that time, the German army will have to face more enemies. In addition, the British will definitely seize this time and send more expeditionary forces to France. Even if the German army has completed its rest by then, will it still be able to defeat the British and French allied forces? William II was very skeptical about this. Yes, father. Regarding the issue of the Western Front, I have discussed it with the Chief of Staff, and we both agree that the Western Front should enter a defensive posture from now on. It will last until next spring. And in this for a while, the Eastern Front continued to maintain an offensive posture, trying to weaken Russia's strength as much as possible, and strive to defeat them. If it can really trigger civil strife in Russia, it would be great. Qin Tian said. Defending from the west and attacking from the east is Germany's strategy for the next 6 months, which was decided by Qin Tian and von Falkenhayn after discussion. William II nodded. However, Oscar, are you sure you will defeat the British and French allied forces in half a year? You know, the British and French allied forces in half a year's time will definitely be much stronger than they are now. Father, I have already considered this point. Therefore, I hope that we can improve the combat effectiveness of the army as much as possible within half a year. This half year is also crucial to us. If we can realize our goal, if it is planned, it will definitely not be a problem to defeat the British and French allied forces in the future. Qin Tian continued. Oh, how do you plan to enhance the combat effectiveness of the troops on the Western Front? William II asked. Your Majesty, His Majesty the Crown Prince suggested that the troops on the Western Front be re-equipped on a large scale, at least in the shortest possible time, to enhance the semi-automatic rifles, sniper rifles, squad machine guns, general-purpose machine guns, grenades, mortars, and the number of artillery of various calibers enhances the firepower of the troops. On the other hand, each legion, imitating the 8th Legion, establishes an armored division to enhance the assault capability of the troops. The previous tanks and each legion were used to cooperate with infantry. It is too wasteful not to display its true power in combat. Now, with the experience of the 8th Armored Division, we can build more armored units to break the current pattern on the Western Front. Feng? Falkenhayn said. The current Western Front has undoubtedly become a trench warfare. This kind of combat method of fighting consumption is not what Germany is willing to accept. However, that requires a large amount of funds. Our military expenditure is already very scarce. William II said. Since the start of the war, a large amount of war materials have been consumed, which has caused Germany's military expenditure to increase day by day. Father, I can advance to equip the army with these weapons. After the war is over, I will pay back. Qin Tian continued. Very well, let's do it. William II nodded in satisfaction. Chapter 303, temporarily endured. After the outbreak of the war, Qin Tian's Deutsche Industrial Group was also greatly affected, especially the Deutsche Welfare Lottery Company. Except for the Allies and the United States, the business of other countries was forced to stop, especially the Allied powers. Qin Tian had long been prohibited from stealing the Allied powers' wealth in this way. Daimler Motor Company has also been greatly affected, and the production of cars has been compressed to a minimum. The rest of the production capacity is used to produce trucks and jeeps urgently needed by the army, to ensure the army's needs in transporting materials and personnel. Of course, Deutsche shipyards, Deutsche arms and Deutsche aircraft manufacturing have shown explosive growth. During the war, these military industries were originally the most profitable time. For Qin Tian, who is as wealthy as his country, it is nothing at all to provide weapons, equipment, and tanks to several legions on the Western Front, even though the money needs to be paid in advance by him temporarily. To Qin Tian, wealth was nothing more than a string of numbers. If he could use this wealth in exchange for the victory of the German Empire in this war, then he would definitely disperse his family property without hesitation. Long before the war broke out, Qin Tian wanted to strengthen the army. But it's a pity that, because of Xiao Maoqi's obstruction, he can only affect the 8th Army. Now, with Wilhelm II's preference, and von Falkenhayn becoming the chief of the general staff, Qin Tian will naturally be able to infiltrate the army without any scruples, further enhancing his influence. Oscar, when will the Imperial Navy be able to defeat the British? William II asked. The strategy on land has been formulated, and William II's eyes have shifted to the sea. The German Navy gained an advantage in the battle with the British Navy, which made William II very satisfied, proving that he was right to support the development of the Navy over the years. Further, the Navy is still implementing the strategy of strangling Britain. The British sea transportation line in the Atlantic Ocean is about to be sunk by our fleet and submarines. However, the Navy has noticed that many ships flying the American flag merchant ships travel between Britain and the United States. You don't need to think about it. When the British are about to be strangled by us, they can only lower their heads and ask the Americans for help. And the Americans have obviously decided to support the British. King God said, the United States will transfuse blood for Britain, which is not beyond Qin Tian's expectation. Germany had a huge advantage in this war. If the Allied powers did not get support, it is very likely that the war would be lost. And the Americans, for their own benefit, are obviously unwilling to see Germany win and dominate the whole of Europe. However, the Americans don't want to go shirtless now, so they can only support Britain in this way and let them continue to confront Germany. Aren't Americans afraid to turn against us if they do this? William II frowned. Further, when the entire European continent is in a mess and all countries are bleeding, the Americans naturally have nothing to fear. Their strong industrial strength and huge population base make them an important country. Whether it is whichever side you join, can play a decisive role, unless the European war ends and a hegemon really rises. Otherwise, the unscrupulousness of the Americans will never stop at all. Qin Tian said. William II's complexion is not very good. This behavior of the Americans made him very angry. If it were him, when he was young, he would have declared war on the Americans desperately, letting them know the consequences of provoking the German Empire. However, the current William II is different. He knows that under the current circumstances, Germany can no longer provoke a powerful enemy like the United States. Once the Americans are pushed to the side of the Allies, it will be very detrimental to Germany. Unless Germany can defeat the Allies in this war and become the hegemon of the European continent. At that time, they will have enough strength to confront the United States, or even suppress the United States. It's just that, as the saying goes, bear a knife on the head. Knowing that the Americans are calculating him, but he can only endure it. This is undoubtedly very difficult for William II. Your Highness, is it possible that we let the Americans harm the interests of the Empire so unscrupulously? Von Falkenhayn also said. He was also very angry at this shameless behavior of the Americans. At this stage, we really have nothing to do with the Americans. Although our army is number one in the world, it is impossible to attack the United States with the restraint of Britain, France, Russia and other countries. What's more, there is also the barrier of the Atlantic Ocean. Now stage, our task is still to defeat the Allied powers. As long as we defeat the Allied powers, then all problems can be resolved. Qin Tian said. Oscar, is there no other way? William II asked. Father, unless our navy defeats the British Navy next year. At that time, we will have a strong force to target the Americans. Even with a strong navy, we will directly and completely block the UK and prohibit ships from any other country from going to the UK. Britain is completely trapped to death, and this will definitely not be difficult. Qin Tian said. Is there going to be a decisive battle with the British Navy next year? The Navy will definitely win, right? William II asked. Yes, father. Next year, the Navy's Bavaria-class battleships and Mackensen-class battlecruisers will be in service. We will add 8 capital ships equipped with 380mm main guns, which will make our Navy more powerful. Great advantage. At that time, we will definitely be able to defeat the British. Qin Tian seemed very confident. In the previous naval battles, the German Navy had already caused the British Navy to lose more than 10 capital ships, and they were all new capital ships of the British Navy. This has made the German Navy really overtake the British Navy. Even if the British Navy still has powerful Queen Elizabeth-class battleships and Revenge-class battleships in service, the German Navy is not afraid at all. It can be said that once there is a decisive battle with the British Navy, the German Navy will inevitably win. After all, Qin Tian still has too many cards in his hand. In addition to the main fleet, there are aircraft carriers and submarines. These weapons can all pose a deadly threat to the main fleet of the British Navy. Combining these reasons, the strength of the German Navy is definitely the #1 in the world, and it has surpassed the Royal Navy by a lot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, Italian Fighting Power. Father, how is our negotiation with the Italians going? When will the Italians fulfill their covenant and participate in the war? Qin Tian asked. The war broke out for more than a month, but the Italians have no intention of participating in the war at all, and are still neutral. In fact, Qin Tian knew very well that the Italians were looking for a price, and they wanted to get the best of both worlds between the Allied powers and the Allied powers. Although Qin Tian knew that in another time and space, the Italians finally chose to betray the Allies and join the Allies to fight. However, Qin Tian didn't know whether the Italians would make the same choice in this time and space. After all, in this time and space, the Allies gained a greater advantage in the war. Among other things, the German Navy alone caused heavy losses to the British Navy in naval battles. This advantage is enough for the Italians to think about it. Qin Tian naturally didn't have a good impression of the Italian kingdom at the two ends of the snake and mouse. He even wished that Italy would join the Allies. Although Italy is also one of the great powers, they rank low among the great powers in terms of industrial strength and military strength. Their military strength is even worse. Whether it is the invasion of Ethiopia or the war with the Ottoman Turkish Empire, it can be clearly seen how incompetent the Italian army is. Therefore, Qin Tian was not worried that the Kingdom of Italy would join the Allies. If the Italians really dare to do that, after Germany wins the war, they can just take this opportunity to solve Italy, remove it from the powers, and become a second-rate country. In the future, the continent of Europe will be dominated by Germany. Qin Tian does not want to share the hegemony of Europe with other countries, even with his own allies. As soon as the Kingdom of Italy was mentioned, William II's face became even more ugly. Before the war broke out, Qin Tian had reminded Wilhelm II and the German cabinet to be careful of the Italians. Although both William II and the German cabinet expressed that they would pay attention to the Italians. But in fact, they were not too worried. Germany and the Kingdom of Italy, after all, have been allied for many years. However, what everyone did not expect was that after the outbreak of the war, the Italians really dared to stand still and refuse to fulfill their obligations under the treaty. The choice of the Italians undoubtedly annoyed William II and the German cabinet very much. However, due to the tense situation, they did not dare to persecute the Italians too much, for fear of forcing the Italians to join the camp of the Allied powers. The Italians still haven't made a clear statement. They obviously want to get greater benefits. William II said. Qin Tian nodded. The Italians have always been like this. They can break any promises for their own benefit. From the very beginning, the empire cannot trust the Italians. It's too late to say anything now, Falkenhayn. Once the Italians join the Allied powers to fight, can our allies resist their attack? William II asked. Originally, Germany was counting on Italy to fulfill the treaty and declare war on the Allies. If Italy can send a large army to cross the Alps and attack southern France, it will definitely win when the main force of the French army is dragged by the German army in northern France. At that time, under the attack of Germany and Italy, France may be defeated soon. However, now because of the attitude of the Italians, this strategy seems to be in vain again. Qin Tian had no fantasies about the Italians from the beginning to the end. Especially the combat effectiveness of the Italian army, which is notorious for pitting teammates. In World War II in another time and space, the Italians saw that Germany was about to defeat France, and they couldn't wait to send troops to attack southern France, wanting to grab a big piece of fat. As a result, the meat was not eaten, but was severely beaten by the French, and suffered heavy losses. The French, who were beaten all over the place by the Germans, successfully defeated the Italians, who had an absolute superiority in troops, in southern France with inferior troops. It can be seen how bad the Italians' combat effectiveness is, Your Majesty. If Italy joins the Allied powers, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will have to draw troops from the front to guard against the Italians. Otherwise, once the Italians invade the Austro-Hungarian Empire from the south, it will bring great harm to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. A huge loss. Von Falkenhayn said. Your Excellency Chief of Staff, there is no need to worry too much about the Italians. Even if they betray the alliance and join the Allied powers, it is no big deal. The border between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy is mostly mountainous. The Austro-Hungarian Empire only needs a small number of troops. We will be able to hold the line of defense. When necessary, we can send 2 or 3 infantry divisions into the Austro-Hungarian Empire to assist them in fighting. I guarantee that it will be absolutely impossible for the Italians to break through a line of defense. Qin Tian a look of confidence. King Wilhelm II and von Falkenhayn couldn't help but frowned. Of course they could tell that Qin Tian was very contemptuous of the Italians' fighting power. However, Italy is also one of the great powers. Weapons and equipment are considered relatively advanced in the world. Even if their combat effectiveness is not as good as that of Germany, it is not too far behind. Oscar, do you look down on the combat effectiveness of the Italian army? William II asked. Yes, father. I think the combat effectiveness of the Italian army is so bad that it can even be described as garbage. Look at when they invaded Ethiopia and their war with the Ottoman Turkish Empire a few years ago. We can clearly see this. Therefore, we don't need to worry too much about the Italians, Qin Tian said. Wilhelm II and von Falkenhayn couldn't help but nodded. Indeed, the previous performance of the Kingdom of Italy was really not in line with their status as one of the great powers. Of course, father, if the Italians can fulfill the covenant and fight against the Allied powers, it will be more or less beneficial to us. For example, the combination of the Italian Navy and the Austro-Hungarian Navy is enough to suppress the main force, the British Mediterranean fleet returning home. In that case, we can cut off the British route in the Mediterranean. At the same time, we can also transport the oil from Cyrenaica back to Germany, Qin Tian said. After the outbreak of the war, the crude oil reserves in Germany are being consumed rapidly and urgently need to be replenished. Okay, I will let the Ministry of Foreign Affairs contact the Italians again. This time, our attitude will be a little tougher, William II said. Chapter 305, Italian Ambition. In Rome, the capital of Italy, although the war has broken out, it seems that it has not been affected at all. As a member of the Allies, the Kingdom of Italy remained neutral as Germany and Austria-Hungary fought to the death with the Entente. The citizens of the Kingdom of Italy seem to think that war is still very far away from them. Some Italians were puzzled as to why they did not fulfill the covenant and declared war on the Allies, but most Italians still supported the cabinet's decision. For the Kingdom of Italy, joining the camp of the Allies at the beginning was just to seek support and obtain development. Now, they have to think carefully about letting the Kingdom of Italy participate in the life and death battle. After all, once the battle is defeated, the consequences may be quite serious. The King of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele III, has always claimed to be a wise and powerful monarch, and he wants to restore the Kingdom of Italy to the glory of the ancient Roman Empire. Moreover, the Kingdom of Italy seems to have been working hard in this direction over the years. They worked hard to expand into the Balkans and North Africa. However, because of the weakening of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, the expansion of the Kingdom of Italy in North Africa was successful. However, its expansion in the Balkans encountered obstacles. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, also a member of the Allied Powers, is also expanding to the Balkan Peninsula, and they occupy a great advantage in the Balkan Peninsula, which hinders the expansion of the Kingdom of Italy. During the ancient Roman period, the powerful Roman Empire ruled the entire Mediterranean. Let the entire Mediterranean Sea become the bathtub of the Roman Empire, and the current Kingdom of Italy is developing in this direction. But unfortunately, it is very difficult for them to achieve this goal. This world war is regarded by the Italians as a good opportunity to achieve their goals. If this opportunity is missed, the Kingdom of Italy will have to wait until the year of the monkey if it wants to revive. Therefore, the Italians have always remained neutral in this war, in order to wait for the price, and strive for the greatest benefit. Your Excellency, the current situation is becoming more and more confusing. How should the Kingdom of Italy choose in this war? We can't always remain neutral, right? In that case, we won't be able to share the dividends of future wars at all. What's more, the attitude of the Germans towards us is getting tougher, and they won't give us too much time to choose. Italian King Vittorio Emanuele III frowned tightly, looked worried. Your Majesty, the current situation is indeed very complicated. Germany still holds the upper hand in this war. However, the Allied powers are not easy to bully. They are reversing the situation bit by bit. If we really want to wait until the battle situation is clear, it will take a long time, said Antonio Sarandra, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Italy. Then which side are we going to fight? Vittorio Emanuele III was a little distressed. This question has always troubled him. He hopes that the Kingdom of Italy can stand on the side of the victor in this war, and after the war is over, it can share the fruits of victory, instead of being slaughtered wanted only by the winner, because it is on the wrong team. However, in such a responsible battle situation, it is undoubtedly very difficult to make a correct judgment. Your Majesty, the battle situation is still unclear. I'm afraid we will have to wait for a while, before we can make a choice that is beneficial to the Kingdom of Italy. Foreign Minister Paul Basili said. Indeed, Your Majesty, it is best to wait for a while. The Minister of War also said. Judging from the current situation, the German army won 2 big victories on the Eastern Front, and the Russians suffered heavy losses. This gave them a great advantage on the Eastern Front. However, Russia's mobilization is coming to an end. At that time, the Russians will send more troops to fight on the front line. It is hard to say whether the Germans can still resist. Besides, the performance of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the Eastern Front is not very good. They were defeated by the Russians. He was beaten hard and lost a lot of troops. If the Russian army dispatched a group army to go north at many critical moments, it is estimated that the Austro-Hungarian Empire would not even be able to defend the Carpathian Mountains. Once the Russian army rushed into the Hungarian plain, otherwise, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will be finished. In addition, the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not take much advantage on the southern front. They can't even defeat a small country like Serbia, which is really a loss to the face of a big country. The Italian Minister of War looked on of contempt. On the Western Front, the Germans still have an advantage. However, their advantage is being lost bit by bit. Especially in the Battle of the Marne, they failed to defeat the British and French allied forces in one fell swoop. The occupation of Paris made them lose their the opportunity to defeat France. This also makes the Germans, who may be selected for a protracted war. Once they start fighting for consumption, the Germans are not the opponent of Britain and France. The Minister of War continued. It can be clearly heard from his words that he is very unfavorable to Germany. Don't forget, the German Navy has an advantage in the Atlantic Ocean, said the Minister of the Navy. Even if the German Navy has the upper hand temporarily, so what? The background of the British Navy is not comparable to that of the upstart German Navy. The outcome of 1 or 2 naval battles cannot determine the outcome of the entire naval battle. It is too early to say who will win the future naval battle, the British or the Germans, the Secretary of State for War continued. Do you mean that we have a better chance of winning by joining the Allied powers? Vittorio Emanuele III said. Your Majesty, from the current point of view, the Allied powers seem to have a better chance of winning. Of course, which side to join in the battle depends on which of them can give us more benefits and the further development of the war situation. Prime Minister Antonio Sarandra said. The other ministers of the Kingdom of Italy nodded one after another, and they thought so too. It is too early to think that the Kingdom of Italy is making a choice now. In addition, the benefits given by various countries are not many, not enough for the Kingdom of Italy to make a decision now. Vittorio Emanuele III seemed to agree with this statement. Well, then let's delay for a while. Whether the glory of the Roman Empire can be restored depends on us this time. Chapter 306, Persecution. At the end of September 1914, the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire were unable to express their views on the Kingdom of Italy. Whether they wanted to declare war on the Allied powers became more and more impatient. German Empire Foreign Minister von Kiedrenwachter and Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister Baron Leopold von Berchter went to Rome, the capital of the Kingdom of Italy, to visit the Kingdom of Italy. Of course, its real purpose is to let the Kingdom of Italy join the Allies in fighting. Of course, this time, they have been officially authorized by Kaiser Wilhelm II and Emperor Franz Joseph I of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they can show a tough attitude in negotiations with the Italians. If the Italians really want to abandon the covenant, then they have to prepare for war with the Kingdom of Italy. However, if the Kingdom of Italy can fulfill the covenant, that would be the best. The Kingdom of Italy attaches great importance to the joint visit of the foreign ministers of the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Although the Kingdom of Italy has not yet made a final decision on whether to join the Allied powers, they obviously cannot completely offend the Allied powers before making a final decision. In that case, it would be tantamount to actively blocking the back road and losing the opportunity to have both sides. Even when they are on the side of the Allied powers, they will definitely not get any benefits. Unless the Kingdom of Italy really wanted to remain neutral in this war, they might have to join the Allies in the end. That is unacceptable for Italy. This means that their interests will be greatly lost. It's just that what the Italians don't know is that neither the German Empire nor the Austro-Hungarian Empire will give them a choice anymore. Italian Prime Minister Antonio Sarandra held a banquet in the Prime Minister's palace for the visiting foreign ministers of Germany and Austria-Hungary. The ministers of the Italian cabinet all attended this banquet. At the banquet, everyone was drinking and drinking, with smiles on their faces, full of laughter. From this point of view, the banquet this time was undoubtedly very successful. However, this seems to be just an appearance. In fact, both sides have their own ghosts. On the Italian side, they tried their best to find out the bottom line of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but no matter whether it was von Kiedrenwachter or Baron Leopold von Berchter, he could be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. People like old foxes, how could it be easy for the Italians to figure out their bottom line? Therefore, the Italians can be regarded as a waste of work. After the banquet, von Kiedrenwachter and Baron Leopold von Berchter returned to the hotel, where they were staying and rested. But Prime Minister Antonio Sarandra and Italian Foreign Minister Paul Sedley couldn't fall asleep. They drank strong coffee to drive away sleepiness, and discussed how to fool the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire in tomorrow's talks. Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, I'm afraid that the visitors this time are not good. If we don't make a clear statement, I'm afraid that it will arouse a strong anger of the two countries. Your Excellency Prime Minister, what should we do this time? Paul Sedley is a little worried. Prime Minister Antonio Sarandra also looked a little unsightly. What the Kingdom of Italy wants to do is to take advantage of both sides and maximize its benefits. If they fall out with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire now, then their long-term layout will be in vain. Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, what do they think? Aren't they afraid that they will push us to one side of the Allied powers? Damn it, is it possible that they think they have the chance to win? But, in the current battle situation, you can't have an absolute advantage. Antonio Sarandra was full of puzzlement. Actually, this is entirely due to these Italians, who overestimated their abilities too much. They regarded themselves as an indispensable force in determining the outcome of this war, and believed that the allies would try their best to win them over. Therefore, they can open their mouths, make those unreasonable demands, and force the allies to curry favor with them according to their intentions. In another time and space, in order to win over the Kingdom of Italy, the Allied powers and the Entente powers did accept their unreasonable conditions. It's just that the empty check issued by the Allied powers is bigger and more attractive. Therefore, the Italians finally chose to betray the Allies and join the Allies to fight. However, in this time and space, everything is different. Qin Tian, who is deeply aware that the Kingdom of Italy is nothing more than a strong outsider, will not give the Italians another chance to blackmail them. Whether the Italians join the Allied powers will have little impact on the future of the war. Therefore, Qin Tian didn't care at all whether the Italians would betray the covenant and join the Allied powers. If the Kingdom of Italy has the strength of the United States, maybe Qin Tian will think about it. But alas, the Kingdom of Italy is not the United States. They have ambitions in vain, but they do not have the corresponding strength. Therefore, the final result is that the bamboo basket fetches water in vain. Your Excellency Prime Minister, let's wait until tomorrow when Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire make specific requests, and then we will reply according to the situation. However, no matter what, we must delay as much as possible. Paul Sedley said. Antonio Salandra nodded. There is no other way. He always had a premonition that this time might be a difficulty for the Kingdom of Italy. The next day, the official began talks, and the place was in the reception room of the Prime Minister's palace. German Foreign Minister von Wachter and Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister Leopold von Berchter sat on one side, Italian Prime Minister Antonio Salandra and Foreign Minister Paul Sedley side. Except for the translators and recorders of both parties, there is no one else in the meeting room. The content of this meeting is also highly confidential. Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The war has broken out for almost 2 months. However, the Kingdom of Italy has been making excuses and delaying participation in the war. Are you trying to break the covenant? Your Majesty the Emperor, I'm very dissatisfied with this. We are here this time. Rome, I just hope that the Kingdom of Italy can give us a clear answer immediately. Von Kidron-Wacht's attitude was very tough. Austro-Hungary also has the same attitude. We can't wait like this forever. Whether the Kingdom of Italy still wants to fulfill the covenant, we must give us an answer immediately. Leopold von Berchter also said. Chapter 307, Leave No Way Out. Antonio Salandra and Paul Sedley were stunned, completely unaware that the foreign ministers of Germany and Austria-Hungary would say such ruthless words when they opened their mouths. This made the two feel a little annoyed, but also a little frightened. Damn, what's going on? Are they crazy? Aren't they afraid to push us into the arms of the Allied powers? Antonio Salandra roared in his heart. The German side and the Austro-Hungarian Empire really did not play their cards according to common sense. This seems to make their calculations all the time, and they will end in failure. Your Excellency, the two foreign ministers, the Kingdom of Italy is a member of the Allied powers, but we have never thought of breaking the alliance. Prime Minister Antonio Salandra said hastily. No matter what, it cannot be admitted that Italy wants to betray the covenant. Not only will Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire regard them as enemies, but it will also have a great adverse effect on the credibility of the Kingdom of Italy. Of course, the Kingdom of Italy has long since lost its credibility. But even if you want to bear such infamy, the prerequisite is to obtain huge benefits for it. Otherwise, wouldn't it be in vain? So, is the Kingdom of Italy planning to fulfill the covenant and declare war on the Allied powers? If that's the case, it would be great. Von Kidron-Wachter said. No, Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Kingdom of Italy is not ready yet. If we rashly join the war, it will be very detrimental to us. Antonio Salandra said. Your Excellency Prime Minister, are you joking? It has been 2 months since the outbreak of the war, and the Kingdom of Italy is still not ready for war. What is the reason for this? Leopold von Berchter, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, said with some dissatisfaction. Germany and Austria-Hungary were fighting the Allies with heavy losses. As an ally, the Italians were actually lazy behind the scenes, which naturally made him very unhappy. Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, this war broke out so suddenly that we were not prepared at all, and we were caught off guard. That's why we haven't been ready for war for a long time. Once we are ready, we will definitely immediately into the war, said Paul Sedley. Paul Sedley's answer is obviously perfunctory. This point, whether it is von Kidron, Wacht or Leopold von Berchter are very clear. Of course they would not give such a chance to Austria-Hungary. Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs. The patience of the Empire is limited. The recent performance of the Kingdom of Italy has exhausted the patience of the Empire. Therefore, the Empire hopes that the Kingdom of Italy will give us an answer within 3 days. If the Kingdom of Italy fails to give us an answer within 3 days, then we will regard the Kingdom of Italy as perfunctory to us and attempt to betray the covenant. At that time, the Empire will directly regard the Kingdom of Italy as an enemy of the Empire. Von Kidron Wachter said. The attitude of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is also the same. You only have 3 days. Whether you will continue to be our ally or become our enemy depends on your own choice. Leopold von Berchter also said arrogantly. Although everyone is a member of the Allied powers, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy have considerable conflicts. The Kingdom of Italy has always coveted the Balkan Peninsula. However, the Austro-Hungarian Empire has been expanding to the Balkan Peninsula and has achieved good results, which will naturally make the Kingdom of Italy very jealous. Antonio Salandra and Paul Sedley were completely overwhelmed. They never expected that Germany and Austria-Hungary would actually give them a request similar to an ultimatum. Neither of them doubted at all whether the Germans were playing tricks to intimidate them. Obviously, if the Kingdom of Italy does not respond within 3 days or does not fulfill the treaty, Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire will really declare war on Italy. The attitudes of Germany and Austria-Hungary greatly exceeded the expectations of the Kingdom of Italy. At the same time, this made them very angry. They were so threatened by Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It is clear that they did not regard them as allies. Your Excellency, the two foreign ministers, is this the attitude of Germany and Austria-Hungary towards their allies? Antonio Salandra looked angry. If the Kingdom of Italy is really our ally, of course we will treat it as an ally. But if the Kingdom of Italy really wants to be our ally, then we have to show the attitude of being an ally. Von Kidron Wacht's answer, full of gunpowder. 3 days is too short. We simply can't reply in such a short time. Paul Sedley still tried to delay the time. 3 days is enough. I think that if the Kingdom of Italy really wanted to fulfill the covenant, it would have made a decision long ago. Von Kidron Wachter said directly. Antonio Salandra was silent for a while and then said, if the Kingdom of Italy fulfills the covenant, can our interests be satisfied? If it is a legitimate interest request, we will consider it. The Kingdom of Italy needs the Austro-Hungarian Empire to cede Trieste, the entire Slovenia, and the Adriatic coastal area of Croatia to us. If Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire agree, the Kingdom of Italy will fulfill the covenant. Antonio Salandra said. The Kingdom of Italy has long coveted the territory of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the Balkan Peninsula. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Leopold von Berchter immediately objected. It's just that Antonio Salandra didn't even look at him, but stared at von Kidron Wachter. He knew very well that it was the Germans who really made the decision. Such a request is too much. The Austro-Hungarian Empire is also an ally of Germany, and it is impossible for us to damage the interests of our allies. If the Kingdom of Italy fulfills the covenant, then, after the victory of the war, the Kingdom of Italy will get its due share of benefits. Yes, von Kidron Wachter said. A glimmer of hope flashed in Antonio Salandra's eyes, and von Kidron Wachter's answer was tantamount to directly rejecting the request of the Kingdom of Italy. If the Kingdom of Italy still wants to obtain those benefits, it will be impossible to fulfill the covenant. Chapter 308, Allied Powers. It's too bullying much. It's too bullying much. How can the Germans treat us like this? Anyway, we have been allies with them for decades. How dare they treat us like this? Italian King Vittorio Emanuele III roared angrily in the palace. The demands made by Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the Kingdom of Italy were completely unacceptable to King Vittorio Emanuele III, who even considered it a disgrace. Your Majesty, we absolutely cannot agree to the demands of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They are clearly humiliating us. The Minister of War also said. The ministers of the other kingdoms almost all insulted Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire with one voice, and at the same time firmly opposed to accepting the demands of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. These people all believe that the legitimate interests of the Kingdom of Italy have not been met. At the same time, they all believed that Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire had obviously underestimated the strength of the Kingdom of Italy. In this case, there is no need to fulfill the so-called treaty anymore. Just join the Allied powers and start a siege of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. If we join the war on the side of the Allies, will we be able to defeat Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire? King Vittorio Emanuele III asked, although he is now in a rage. However, he has not lost his mind, knowing that this is a choice related to the future destiny of the Kingdom of Italy. If there is a slight difference, the final result will be unbearable. Your Majesty, if we join the Allied powers will definitely be able to defeat Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The British and French coalition forces have gradually gained a firm foothold on the Western Front. The German plan to quickly destroy France has gone bankrupt. Next, they will have to face endless counterattacks from the British and French allied forces. Although the Germans have an advantage on the Eastern Front, once Russia's general mobilization is completed, they will face attacks from millions of Russian troops. At that time, the Germans will be exhausting, and it is very possible to be defeated. As for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they have not been able to win on the southern or eastern fronts. If it were not for the support of the Germans, they would have been defeated long ago. If we join the war and invest the main force to cross the Alps and attack the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we will definitely be able to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire. After the Austro-Hungarian Empire is defeated, we can join forces with Britain, France, and Russia to besiege Germany. At that time, Germany will definitely be defeated. The Minister of War said excitedly, as if he had seen the moment when the army of the Kingdom of Italy entered Berlin. The other cabinet ministers of the Kingdom of Italy also seemed to be attracted, and kept nodding one by one, as if they really had the chance to win. Prime Minister, what's your opinion? Vittorio Emanuele III looked at Prime Minister Antonio Salandra. Your Majesty, the attitude of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire is very clear now. They refuse to cede those territories in the Balkan Peninsula to us. Therefore, we have only one choice if we want to obtain those territories, and that is to join the Allied powers. However, we also have to find a way to get the maximum benefits from the Allied powers. Antonio Salandra said. King Vittorio Emanuele III nodded. Well, the Prime Minister will be fully responsible for the negotiations with the Allied powers. This time, we will let the whole world know that the revival of the Kingdom of Italy is impossible. Blocked. Let Germany and Austria-Hungary pay for their actions. Vittorio Emanuele III felt deeply insulted. Therefore, he couldn't wait to wash away that shame. Only by defeating Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and making them lose in this war, can they truly wash away this shame. Yes, Your Majesty. The ministers of the Kingdom of Italy replied one after another. Everyone is full of spirits, as if they really have a complete grasp of the future war. Britain and France, as the main members of the Allied powers. In this war, they also endured tremendous pressure. Especially in the early days of the war, Germany caused them great losses, making them worry all the time that they would lose the war. Therefore, finding a way to win over other countries, to deal with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire together has become their best choice. The primary target of Britain and France is undoubtedly the Kingdom of Italy, a member of the Allied powers. Although the Kingdom of Italy is a member of the Allied powers, both Britain and France believe that with the sloppy style of the Kingdom of Italy and the conflicts between them and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as long as Britain and France can give them enough benefits, the Kingdom of Italy will definitely betray the Allies and join the war on the side of the Allies. If the Kingdom of Italy can be successfully persuaded, this will truly form a comprehensive encirclement of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, giving them an absolute advantage in the war. It is definitely not a delusion to reverse the unfavorable situation in front of you. On the second day after the German Foreign Minister and the Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister arrived in Italy, the British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey and the French Foreign Minister Théophile Delcasse secretly arrived in Rome. They did not know that the German Foreign Minister and the Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister would come to Rome. It was purely by chance. However, after learning of this situation, they couldn't help but feel even more fortunate, for fear that they would be late, and the Kingdom of Italy would be persuaded by Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire to continue to fulfill the covenant. In that case, it would be a serious blow to the Allies. Especially France, which has suffered heavy losses, can no longer afford Italy to attack them from the south. That night, Italian Prime Minister Antonio Sarandra and Foreign Minister Paul Sedley met with British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey and French Foreign Minister Théophile Delcasse in a secret estate outside Rome, had secret talks. Your Excellency, on behalf of the British Empire and the French Republic, I sincerely invite the Kingdom of Italy to join the Allied powers in a war against the Allied powers. In this war, the Allied powers will undoubtedly represent the righteous side, Sir Edward Grey said. However, Antonio Sarandra did not express his position. In this war, where is there any righteous and evil side? It is basically a war between the great powers for their own interests. If the Kingdom of Italy is willing to join the Allied powers, after the war is over, we guarantee that the Kingdom of Italy will benefit greatly, Théophile Delcasse also said. Chapter 309, Betrayal. The Kingdom of Italy actually does not want to be involved in this war. We are a peace-loving country. Therefore, this is why we are a member of the Allied powers. But we did not fulfill the covenant when the war broke out, said Antonio Sarandra. Peace-loving country? Sir Edward Grey and Théophile Delcasse both sneered. This is just a step that the Italians are looking for their sloppy style. In fact, everyone knows what kind of plans the Italians have. Your Excellency, the British Empire and the French Republic are also peace-loving countries. We are all forced to be involved in this war. However, the war has already begun, and it is useless to say that. Our only what can be done is to defeat the evil enemy and strive for an early end to the war. This is the most important thing right now. We sincerely invite the Kingdom of Italy to join our camp. Sir Edward Grey once again issued an invitation. Antonio Sarandra seemed to have sensed the sincerity of the British and the French, and his tone, that had been resolute, was a little looser, which made both Sir Edward Grey and Théophile Delcasse very upset. For uplifting. 2. The Kingdom of Italy is not ready for war. Our army has not been mobilized yet, and it lacks all kinds of weapons and equipment. At the same time, military expenditure is also seriously lacking. Antonio Sarandra continued. Sir Edward Grey and Théophile Delcasse both knew that this was an opportunity for the Italians to raise conditions. Your Excellency, the French Republic can provide the Kingdom of Italy with a batch of equipment, enough for you to arm 200,000 people, Théophile Delcasse said. Although France's weapons and equipment were once tight, if the Italians can be drawn into their camp, it is completely worth paying for these weapons and equipment. The British Empire can also provide the Kingdom of Italy with enough weapons and equipment to arm 200,000 people, Sir Edward Grey also said. Antonio Sarandra nodded in satisfaction. The weapons and equipment provided by Britain and France can save them a lot of money. Regarding military spending, it is also not a problem for Britain and France. Although, because of the war, their government has begun to borrow a lot of money. But both countries are already much wealthier than Italy. Both Sir Edward Grey and Théophile Delcasse stated that, if the Kingdom of Italy was willing to join the Allies in fighting, they would each provide the Kingdom of Italy with an interest-free loan of £100 million. This is already a large amount of money for the Kingdom of Italy, and it also makes Antonio Sarandra very satisfied. In the end, Antonio Sarandra raised the issue of the distribution of post-war interests, which is the most concerned issue of the Kingdom of Italy. Antonio Sarandra said that after the war, the Kingdom of Italy hoped to obtain the coastal areas of the Adriatic Sea of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the Balkan Peninsula. On this issue, the British and the French are much more generous than Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, this was not their territory in the first place. This kind of generosity to others is undoubtedly their favorite thing to do. Anyway, it is harming the interests of others and seeking benefits for them. For the Italians' request, Britain and France fully agreed. Britain and France not only clearly promised Italy that Trieste, Fiume, Istria and Dalmatia could be acquired, but also gave Italy the Dodecanese Islands, which are mainly populated by Greeks. It was also agreed that Italy could expand its African colonies after the war and could participate in the partition of Turkey's territory. This decision of Britain and France made Antonio Sarandra very satisfied. If the final victor of the war is really the Allied powers, then the Kingdom of Italy will gain huge benefits in this war. Even, this is not far from their goal of revitalizing the Roman Empire and turning the Mediterranean Sea into their inner lake. You, too, I already know your sincerity. I will report to His Majesty the King immediately. I can give you an answer tomorrow at the latest. However, I think His Majesty the King will definitely not reject the friendship between your two countries. Antonio Salandra said with a smile on his face. Sir Edward Grey and Theophile Delcase were also very happy. They did not expect that everything would go so smoothly. The Italians agreed to join their camp so easily. This is really surprising. To their surprise, although the Kingdom of Italy also made some demands. However, for Britain and France, which are eager to reverse the situation and win the war, such a request is nothing at all. As long as the final victory can be obtained, these are not problems. After the meeting ended, Antonio Salandra and Paul Sedley rushed to the palace immediately to report the good news to Vittorio Emanuele III. Although, it's too late now. However, Vittorio Emanuele III is still waiting for news of their talks. Before he got the exact news, he might not even be able to sleep soundly. Your Majesty, the British and the French are very sincere. As long as we join the Allies, they are willing to provide us with weapons and equipment capable of arming 200,000 troops, and at the same time, each provide us with an interest-free loan of £100 million. Most importantly, they promised us not only Trieste, Fiume, Istria and Dalmatia, but perhaps the Dodecanese Islands, which are mostly Greek inhabited. They even agreed that we can expand its African colonies after the war and participate in the partition of Turkey's territory. Antonio Sarandra smiled. Haha, but it's really great. I have already felt the sincerity of Britain and France. King Vittorio Emanuele III laughed, as if he had received some promise same from Britain and France. They seem to have forgotten what price they would have to pay if the Kingdom of Italy lost the war. Your Majesty, shall we agree to the request of Britain and France and join the Allies to fight? Paul Sedley asked. Of course, since Britain and France are so sincere, for the benefit of the Kingdom of Italy, I have decided to join the Allied powers to fight. King Vittorio Emanuele III made the final decision. Chapter 310, Italian Choice. Both, I'm sorry, after our deliberation, we still decided to remain neutral. Antonio Salandra said to von Kidron-Wascht, and Leopold von Baron-Belsador said, after deciding to join the Allied powers to fight, Italy no longer wanted to play tricks with Germany and Austria, so as not to waste time. The faces of von Kidron-Wascht and Baron Leopold von Berchter suddenly became very ugly. Although, before that, they also expected that in the face of the oppression of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Kingdom of Italy might make such a choice. However, they did not expect that they would actually dare to do this in such a short period of time. Damn it, the Italians are crazy. They dare to reject the request of the Empire. Could it be that they really want to be enemies of the Empire? Von Kidron-Wascht thought angrily. Your Excellency Prime Minister, is this the final decision of the Kingdom of Italy? For the sake of our allies for so many years, I advise your country to think about it carefully. Once such a decision is made, your country should know what it means. Von Kidron-Wascht said with a cold face. Of course we know what this means. However, your two countries are pressing against the Kingdom of Italy, and there is nothing we can do about it. Antonio Salandra looked innocent. Just like the Kingdom of Italy, the reason for making such a choice is that the culprit is exactly the same as Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well, since the Kingdom of Italy has already made its own choice, then it is useless for us to say more. I hope that the Kingdom of Italy will not regret today's choice in the future. Von Kidron watched till his eyes were cold. He knew that after today, this former ally would become their enemy and the target they wanted to defeat. HMPH. The Kingdom of Italy will definitely pay the price for today's choice. Baron Leopold von Berkida looked angry. The betrayal of the Kingdom of Italy undoubtedly posed the most direct threat to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This also forced the Austro-Hungarian Empire to deploy its military forces on the southern front. Otherwise, once the Kingdom of Italy launches an attack, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will be in a dangerous situation of being attacked from both sides. The Kingdom of Italy will never regret it, because we will be victors. Antonio Salandra looked confident, as if they really had the chance to win. The meeting broke up this time. Von Kidron washed and Baron Leopold von Berkida did not waste any more time in Rome. They had to rush back to the country immediately and convey the news that the Kingdom of Italy planned to betray the allies to the country. The report also allows a country to prepare early so as not to be caught off guard. However, when von Kidron washed and Baron Leopold von Berkida had just sent the news back to the country through secret channels, the Kingdom of Italy was already in Rome, and it was formally united with Britain and France. Countries signed the treaty. The treaty stipulated that the Kingdom of Italy abolish the Triple Alliance Treaty and joined the war on the side of the Allied powers. Within a month of the signing of the treaty, the Kingdom of Italy declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary and sent the main force of its army to attack Austria-Hungary. Britain and France will also provide weapons and equipment and interest-free loans to the Kingdom of Italy within the city. Moreover, in the treaty, there are also clear provisions on the benefits that the Kingdom of Italy deserves after the war. The Kingdom of Italy betrayed its promise, betrayed the treaty, and joined the Allied powers to fight. This undoubtedly caused an uproar for the whole world. Originally, in this war, because of Germany's good performance, the Allies seemed to have an advantage in this war. However, the betrayal of the Kingdom of Italy will wipe out the advantages of the Allies, and even put them at a disadvantage. Such a sudden change undoubtedly made the outcome of this war even more confusing. Of course, Britain, France, and Russia were all greatly relieved. Germany's performance was so vigorous that they all worried whether they could defeat Germany in this battle. But now with the support of the Kingdom of Italy, their chances of winning have undoubtedly increased by several points. As for Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, of course they were furious about this. Kaiser Wilhelm II was in the office, cursing the Kingdom of Italy as a despicable and shameless villain. You know, Germany, Austria, and Italy have been in an alliance for many years. Now, for their own benefit, they blatantly betrayed the German Empire. This kind of villainous behavior made William II very angry. Everyone, the Italians have betrayed us, signed a treaty with Britain and France, and will join the Allies to fight. This is undoubtedly very bad news for us. How should we respond to this? William II asked. He was very worried that the Allies now had an advantage in the war. But after the Italians turned against the water, this made their advantage have been lost, and they were even at a disadvantage. William II didn't want to be a loser in this war. Once the German Empire lost the war, it would really be a complete defeat. Your Majesty, the Austro-Hungarian Empire must mobilize its troops in advance and deploy its troops in the south to guard against Italian attacks. If the Italians cross the Alps and invade the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the consequences will be very serious. Von Falkenhayn said. William II nodded, but in this case, the strength of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the Eastern Front will inevitably be weakened. It seems that we have to hurry up to help the Austro-Hungarian Empire and defeat Russia. Oscar, what do you think about this? Kaiser Wilhelm II asked. Father, I don't think there is anything to worry about, because the fighting power of the Italians is really terrible. Their joining the Allied powers will not bring any benefits to the Allied powers, but will become a drag on the Allied powers. If the Kingdom of Italy joins the Allied powers to fight, we may need to use 80 divisions to protect them. But if Italy joins the Allied powers to fight, we only need to use 40 divisions to completely defeat them. Qin Tian face with a confident smile. Wilhelm II and the senior military and political officials of the German Empire were taken aback for a moment, and then burst out laughing. Although they might feel that what Qin Tian said was exaggerated, they were much less worried about the Kingdom of Italy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311. Declare War on Italy. For a long time, Qin Tian didn't think much of the Italians' fighting power, so he didn't worry about Italy betraying the Allies and taking refuge in the Allies. What's more, in another time and space, the Italians did the same. Therefore, Qin Tian was not at all surprised by the Italians' choice. It's just that, compared with another time and space, the time of Italian betrayal was a few months earlier. Of course, although Qin Tian is not worried, it does not mean that other people are not worried. Italy, after all, is an industrial powerhouse with a population of 20 to 30 million. After mobilization, at least 2 million troops can be armed. In today's world, this is already a proper military power. Although, the Italians did not perform very well in the Ethiopian battlefield and the North African battlefield. But whether they are really as vulnerable as Qin Tian said, is very difficult to say. The Italians have betrayed us. It is foreseeable that they will definitely launch an attack on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Therefore, the Austro-Hungarian Empire must first draw troops from the front line and return to the southern line to ensure that it can withstand the Italian attack. From the Italians judging from the troops that can be dispatched, the Austro-Hungarian Empire may have to withdraw an army group from the front line to return to the defense. Von Falkenhayn said, a group army of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is enough to resist the attack of the Italians. Of course, if everyone thinks it is not safe, we can send 3 infantry divisions to reinforce the Austro-Hungarian Empire. With the help of the terrain of the Alps, we can resist the Italians' attack. Offensive is definitely not a problem. However, our current enemies are still Britain, France, and Russia, and the Italians can ignore them for now. After we defeat Britain, France, and Russia, the Italians will naturally have nothing to worry about. Qin Tian said, well, let's do this. Let the Austro-Hungarian Empire draw troops to defend Italy, and we will send 3 infantry divisions to reinforce them. William II made a decision. This is the end of the matter, and it is useless to say anything else. All that can be done now is to resist the Italian attack and minimize losses. Your Majesty, we will contact the Austro-Hungarian Empire immediately. However, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is already somewhat powerless to resist the Russian attack on the Eastern Front. If the army is deployed again, this will make them extremely easy to be attacked by the Russians. Defeat. In order to avoid this situation, the 8th Army and the Austro-Hungarian Army must start the joint operation against the Russian Southwest Front Army as soon as possible. Von Falkenhayn said. For the pig teammate of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Germany obviously cannot give up easily. If the Austro-Hungarian Empire is abandoned, then Germany will really fight alone and fight against the whole world with its own strength. Oscar, is the rest of the 8th Army complete? William II asked. He is now full of confidence in the 8th Army, which has repeatedly performed miracles on the Eastern Front. Father, the rest of the 8th Army is almost complete. However, after the 8th Army goes south, which army will the defense of East Prussia and Poland be handed over to? Qin Tian asked. Although the northwest front of the Russian army has been completely defeated, this does not mean that Russia has no threat to East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland. Once the troops mobilized by the Russian army from the rear arrive, they can still continue to attack. Therefore, after the 8th Army went south, the lair must also be defended by troops. William II frowned. This is indeed a problem. Do you have any suggestions? William II asked. Your Majesty, the General Staff hopes that the 9th Army can be formed. The 9th Army will be formed from the Reserve Army, plus the newly formed 9th Armored Division. The 9th Army can be formed while being responsible for the defense of East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland. In this case, even if the troops mobilized by the Russians from the rear arrive, they can completely resist their attack. Von Falkenhayn suggested. This is the result of discussions between Qin Tian and von Falkenhayn. The 8th Army is already under Qin Tian's control. Next, Qin Tian had to find a way to expand his influence to other legions. Of course, the difficulty of expanding influence like other legions is obviously more difficult than controlling the newly formed legion. For this reason, Qin Tian's intend to use a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, he will actively expand his influence in other legions, and on the other hand, he will form a new legion. In this case, his influence within the army will continue to increase. King William II thought about it for a while, and then nodded in agreement. After failing to quickly win victory on the Western Front, William II also felt that the German army was seriously short of troops. This is mainly because Germany mobilized only 50% of its troops when the war broke out. Germany's old rival, France, has already mobilized 80% of its troops. In contrast, Germany's mobilization appears incomplete. The 9th Army can be. Do you have any suggestions for the Commander-in-Chief of Staff? William II then asked. Father, I suggest that General Hindenburg be the commander of the 9th Army. As for the Chief of Staff, General Hoffmann, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the 8th Army can be appointed. Qin Tian directly expressed his opinion. Both Hindenburg and Hoffmann were his men. Having them as commanders and chiefs of staff of the formed newly 9th Army would ensure his influence over the newly formed army. Your Majesty, the combat effectiveness of the 8th Army is obvious to all. Therefore, the 9th Army will be formed in accordance with the organization of the 8th Army. Generals Hindenburg and Hoffmann will serve as the 9th Army. The Commander-in-Chief of Staff of the Legion are also based on this consideration. Von Falkenhayn said, "Okay, let's do what you want." William II nodded. Although he was very clear that this was Qin Tian taking the opportunity to expand his influence in the army, William II, who had already regarded Qin Tian as his only heir, no longer cared so much about it. Small movements often turn a blind eye. Yes, Your Majesty. Von Falkenhayn nodded. With the approval of William II, everything will become very easy. On October 1, 1914, the German Empire declared war on Italy, the traitor, on the grounds that the Kingdom of Italy betrayed the alliance treaty. Just 2 hours later, Austria-Hungary also declared war on the Kingdom of Italy. And that night, the Kingdom of Italy also declared war on the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Once allies, on this day, become enemies. Chapter 312, Crown Prince Carol. Austro-Hungarian Empire, Vienna, Schönbrunn Palace. The aged ruler of the empire, Franz Joseph I, leaned on his emperor's throne and closed his eyes slightly, as if he had fallen asleep. The important ministers of the Austro-Hungarian Empire are reporting the war situation and the current international situation to him. Empire Crown Prince Carol stood aside respectfully, listening to the teachings of Franz Joseph I after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Carol immediately became the Crown Prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. After all, as a first-class power in Europe, the Austro-Hungarian Empire cannot live without a crown prince. Carol is the grandson of Archduke Karol Ludwig, the younger brother of Franz Joseph I. Since Franz Joseph I had no heir to the throne, he had no choice but to choose Carol to inherit the crown prince and become Franz Joseph I Emperor of the Empire after the death of Franz Joseph I. Although Franz Joseph I was not satisfied with this, there was no other way. Although his son is long gone, the current international situation is very unfavorable to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Franz Joseph I did not expect that the battle would turn out like this, which was completely different from what he had expected at the beginning. You know, the current Austro-Hungarian Empire is definitely one of the top powers in the world. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a traditional European power, Russia, Britain, Austria, and France, and one of the 8 major powers in the world at that time, Britain, France, Germany, the United States, Russia, Austria, Italy, and Japan. Austria-Hungary was the great empire of Eastern Europe. The vast land area ranked 3rd in Europe at that time, second only to Russia and the Ottoman Empire. The total population was large, slightly inferior to Russia and Germany, ranking 3rd in Europe, strong, ranking 4th in the world, second only to Germany, the United Kingdom and the United States. Its extensive resource reserves and mobilized troops are also the 4th in Europe, only less than Russia, Germany, and France, and the types of agricultural Products. The variety and richness of crude oil production surpass France, which has sophisticated agriculture, and Russia, which is oriented to grain export, and ranks first in Europe. The advanced technology of heavy artillery weapons produced by Skoda Arsenal is far ahead, ranking first in the world. First, with the strength of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, its performance in this war should be far from this. However, the performance of the Austrian army on the battlefield made Franz Joseph I, the great emperor, feel ashamed. On the southern battlefield, they have dispatched 2 armies to deal with a small Serbia, but they still cannot defeat Serbia. Even though Belgrade has been captured, Serbia's resistance continues. As a result, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had to continue to deploy heavy troops in Serbia, and the casualties were still increasing. Not to mention the Eastern Front. If the deployment of the German 8th Army defeated the Russian Northwest Front and caused heavy damage to the Russian army, forcing the Russian army to dispatch troops from the Southwest Front, the Austrian army might have been defeated. The ferocious and savage Russians have rushed into the rich wasteland of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and have begun to plunder. Now, Italy has betrayed the covenant and has become the enemy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It can be expected that the Italian offensive will begin soon. At that time, the southern front of the Austro-Hungarian Empire will also face the attack of powerful enemies, which will make the situation facing the Austro-Hungarian Empire even more critical. Your Majesty, the imperial government has declared war on the Kingdom of Italy. The German Empire has declared war on the Kingdom of Italy 2 hours before us, said Mario Weber, Prime Minister of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well! Exclamation mark. The Kingdom of Italy betrayed the covenant and became our enemy. The empire should declare war on it. But, is our army ready to fight against the Italians? Franz Joseph I asked. Your Majesty, the First Army has returned from the Eastern Front. They will be deployed to the Southern Front to prevent the Italians from attacking us. In addition, the German Empire will send 3 infantry divisions to help us defend against the Italians. We are confident that with the help of the terrain of the Alps, resist the attack of the Italians, said Duke Kaspar, Austrian Minister of War and Minister of War of the central government of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Franz Joseph I nodded. If this is the case, the Italians are nothing to worry about. After we have dealt with the Russians, we will turn around and deal with them. Yes, Your Majesty. Duke Kaspar agreed deeply. For the Austrian army, the brutal Russians are obviously more difficult to deal with. As for the Italians, they have never been taken seriously by them. The 2 countries have been competing in the Balkans for many years, but the Austro-Hungarian Empire almost always suppressed the Kingdom of Italy. After the deployment of the First Army, what should we do on the Eastern Front? Crown Prince Kirill asked. The Russians on the Eastern Front are not easy to deal with. For a long time, the Austrian army has struggled to support on the Eastern Front and suffered heavy losses. If a main group army is transferred, won't this make the Austrian army's situation more difficult? Regarding the battlefield on the Eastern Front, Germany proposed to cooperate with us to deal with the Russian Southwest Front army. The German 8th Army will go south to attack the Russian Southwest Front army. With the combat effectiveness of the German 8th Army, plus us, we will defeat the Russian Southwest Front army. It's definitely not difficult. Duke Kaspar smiled. Before, he was still worried about the situation on the Eastern Front, but after learning that the German allies would lend a helping hand, he was greatly relieved. Well, Crown Prince Oscar's 8th Army has a strong fighting capacity. In less than 2 months, nearly 1 million Russian troops have been wiped out. With their support, we will definitely be able to defeat the Russian Southwest Front army. A smile appeared on Franz Joseph I's face, full of age spots. For him, this is undoubtedly one of the rare good news he has heard in the past few months. Yes, Your Majesty. The 8th Army of His Royal Highness Crown Prince Oscar is already the most powerful among the several legions of the German army. Grand Duke Kaspar sighed. Crown Prince Oscar is really a genius. The German Empire has him as the Crown Prince, and it is God who favors the German Empire. Franz Joseph I sighed. If the Austro-Hungarian Empire had such an heir, it might not be what it is now. After hearing Joseph I's approval, Crown Prince Carol couldn't help curling his lips. He was full of disdain for the German Crown Prince, who was 1 year younger than him. In his opinion, Qin Tian was just lucky. If he was the crown prince of the German Empire, he would definitely do better than Qin Tian. Chapter 313, Crown Prince vs. Crown Prince. Your Majesty, I heard that Crown Prince Oscar has already rushed to the front line. I hope to go to the front line, to get to know this talented Crown Prince, and at the same time, to boost the morale of the troops on the front line. Karol, the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary, said to Franz Joseph. I said. Franz Joseph. I thought for a few seconds, then nodded in agreement. The well-aged Franz Joseph. I was well aware of Crown Prince Karol's little thoughts. It was nothing more than jealousy of the brilliant achievements of the Crown Prince of the German Empire at such a young age. However, Franz Joseph, I believed that there would be no harm in letting Crown Prince Karol go and see his own differences. After all, Karol is now the Crown Prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Franz Joseph I still counts on the future Crown Prince Karol to lead the Austro-Hungarian Empire to develop even stronger. The headquarters of the Austrian army on the Eastern Front is located in Uzhhorod. Because of the importance of the battlefield on the Eastern Front, Marshal Franz Conrad Herzendorf, Chief of Staff of the Austrian Army, personally sat here to direct the Austrian army to fight the Russian army. It's just that, in the battles in the past few days, the Austrian army has almost won less and lost more. If this continues, I'm afraid that it will not be long before they will be defeated by the Russian army. Before, the Austrian army assembled 4 armies on the Eastern Front, namely the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th armies, all of which were allied troops of the Austrian army. But because of the betrayal of the Kingdom of Italy, the 1st army had to return to the country to help, leaving only 3 armies on the front line with more than 700,000 people. The Russian army on the opposite side has recovered to 4 army groups, and, according to the information they received, there is another Russian army on the way. The disastrous defeat of the Russian army in the Kingdom of Poland made Tsar Nicholas II very angry. Of course, this also let him know how powerful the German army is. In order to vent his anger, Nicholas II had no choice but to target the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In the eyes of the Tsar and the senior generals of the Russian army, the Germans were too powerful to deal with. But Austria-Hungary was different. If it can beat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or even completely defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russia can also regain face on the battlefield. It can create better opportunities for the subsequent defeat of Germany. The Russians did this, which naturally put the Austro-Hungarian Empire under greater pressure on the Eastern Front. The Austrian Eastern Front Command, Baron Herzendorf Marshal, and several army commanders are waiting for the arrival of Crown Prince Karol. It is undoubtedly a big event for these frontline generals that the Crown Prince wants to inspect the front line. What's more, Archduke Friedrich, one of the commanders-in-chief of the Austro-Hungarian army, will also come to the front with Crown Prince Karol. This made the generals on the front line couldn't help but pay more attention to it. Your Excellency Chief of Staff, the current situation is becoming more and more unfavorable for the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the entire Allied powers. The Italians are despicable and shameless. They actually betrayed us and defected to the Allied powers. If we had known that they would drive out such a thing, we should have attacked them at the beginning of the war and defeated them. An Austrian General Pommelmeli, commander of the Austrian Second Army, looked angry. The betrayal of the Italians was indeed beyond our expectations. However, if we want to keep the Italians, we have to pay a lot of territory along the Adriatic Sea. This is also not good for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It may be acceptable, Baron Marshal Herzendorf said with a cold face. For the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Italy is undoubtedly their old enemy. On this issue, Germany stood on the side of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which made the generals of the Austro-Hungarian Empire very grateful, although the current situation is not good for us. However, the war has just begun. It is hard to say who will win and who will lose. Our German allies performed quite amazingly in this war. Not only the German army once again proved to the world that their title of number 1 in the world is not for nothing. The German Navy also fought very well, and even suppressed the British Royal Navy. Therefore, it is not that we have no chance of winning this battle. Austrian Army General Borajevic, commander of the Third Army, said. All the generals of the Austrian army nodded their heads in agreement with this point of view. Although, the Austrian army's performance in this war was very bad, and it was completely inconsistent with their national strength, which made these generals of the Austrian army feel ashamed. However, fortunately, their ally, the German Empire, played very well. Therefore, they are not worried about losing in this battle. If the German Empire wins the war, they will also be able to hitch a ride, become the winner of the war, and share the dividends of the war. Several luxury Daimler A-class cars arrived at the headquarters under the guard of a troop of cavalry. Marshal Herzendorf and others immediately went up to him. As a close ally of the German Empire, many products of Germany can be popular in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a model of luxury cars, Daimler's A-class car has naturally become the object of pursuit by senior officials of the Austro-Hungarian Empire government and military generals. This time, Crown Prince Carol arrived at the front line in this kind of car. His Royal Highness, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, on behalf of the frontline soldiers, I welcome you to the front line. Baron Herzendorf Marshal, his face full of smiles. Well, Your Excellency Marshal, you are too polite. Has the Crown Prince of Germany arrived? After getting off the car, Crown Prince Carol looked around. His Royal Highness Oscar hasn't arrived yet. We contacted him before, and it is estimated that he will arrive tomorrow. Baron Marshal Herzendorf said. It won't be until tomorrow? Huh. You really know how to put on airs. Crown Prince Carol snorted coldly. In his opinion, Qin Tian is the Crown Prince of Germany, and he is also the Crown Prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Regardless of status, he is no worse than Qin Tian. Even, he is 1 year older than Qin Tian. No matter what, Qin Tian should have arrived first to greet him. Baron Marshal Herzendorf was a little speechless. He now felt that it was not a good thing for Crown Prince Carol to go to the front line. If the Germans are angry, and they are no longer reinforced, then this will be troublesome. Baron Marshal Herzendorf hurriedly looked at Archduke Friedrich, and asked him for help. Archduke Friedrich knew what Baron Marshal Herzendorf meant. His Royal Highness Oscar came from Berlin. It will take more time, let's wait. The next day, Qin Tian rushed all the way to Uzhhorod. The troops of the 8th Army had already rushed to the front line, and they were not with Qin Tian. Chapter 314, Unreliable Ally. From Berlin to Uzhhorod, the distance is not far, hundreds of kilometers. At the same time, there is no direct railway connection. Qin Tian can only go all the way by car. Major General Ludendorff, Chief of Staff of the 8th Army, did not act with him, but rushed to the front with the staff. The only one who rushed to the front line with Qin Tian was Brigadier General Manstein, the Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief of Operations. Brigadier General Hoffmann, the former Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief of Operations, has been promoted to Major General and served as the Chief of Staff of the 9th Army. The Crown Prince of the German Empire arrived in Uzhhorod, and the generals of the Austrian army, as well as Crown Prince Carol and Archduke Friedrich who arrived here first, all went to greet him. Although Crown Prince Carol was somewhat unhappy, he could not show it under the persuasion of Grand Duke Friedrich. After all, the current occupation is not good for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Crown Prince of the German Empire came to help them. His Royal Highness Oscar, welcome to Uzhhorod. His Majesty the Emperor is very grateful to the German Empire for lending a helping hand to support us at this critical moment. Crown Prince Carol's face was full of smiles. However, if you look closely, you can tell that it's clearly a hypocritical smile. Qin Tian was a little puzzled, not knowing why Crown Prince Carol had such an expression. However, he didn't take this to heart. In Qin Tian's eyes, Crown Prince Carol is just a lucky guy. If Franz Joseph I's son hadn't committed suicide and Archduke Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated, it would have been out of Carol's turn to become the Crown Prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In addition, in another time and space, Crown Prince Carol's performance after succeeding to the throne was also extremely bad. As the emperor of one of the two great empires of the Allied powers, he was so focused on peace that he had no determination to continue the war and defeat the enemy, and this caused the Allied powers to lose miserably in this war. Of course, the fate of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was even more miserable. After the defeat, the Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrated directly, split into multiple countries, and became a small second and third-rate country, completely removed from the powers. and Carol's own fate is also a tragedy. In another time and space, Carol loves peace. After succeeding to the throne, he tried several times to make the Austro-Hungarian Empire withdraw from the First World War by secretly suggesting to the Allies France negotiated peace, but because he refused to cede any of the Habsburg lands to Italy, the behind-the-scenes activities completely failed, and when his efforts to support France's claims to Alsace and Lorraine were exposed, his reputation was badly damaged both in Germany and at home, and Austria was placed in an embarrassing position. At the end of World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire fell into civil strife and chaos. US President Woodrow Wilson proposed a 14-point agreement, advocating the independence of the nations of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. On October 14th, Carol convened the Royal Parliament, accepted the 14-point agreement, and agreed to establish a federal state with autonomous governments of various ethnic groups. But the reforms quickly got out of hand, and national self-governments declared full independence one after another, and withdrew from the First World War. The Republicans in Austria finally rejected the monarchy. On November 11, 1918, Carol announced, "I officially give up participating in any government affairs, but I will not give up the throne." The next day, the German-Austrian Republic was established, and Carol was forced to leave Vienna. In March 1919, he went into exile in Switzerland. In April, the Austrian Parliament announced the abolition of Carol's throne. In 1921, Carol tried twice to restore the place with the help of Hungarian conservatives, but failed because he did not get the support of the Hungarian head of state, Admiral Horthy Miklas. Exiled to Madeira Island, he lived a life of extreme poverty. In 1922, Carol died of pneumonia at the age of 34. So, in Qin Tian's eyes, Crown Prince Carol is a completely tragic character. If he hadn't changed history and saved the Austro-Hungarian Empire from the danger of defeat, the life of Crown Prince Carol would have been a coffee table full of cups and utensils. After some brief greetings, Qin Tian and Brigadier General Manstein attended the luncheon prepared by the Austrian Army Command. Although the situation on the front line is very critical, the lunch prepared by the Austrian Army is very rich. From this, it seems that they don't have any worries about the current situation at all. After lunch, Qin Tian was arranged to rest in the lounge. Although Qin Tian was a little displeased with this, he never showed it. Besides, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is now the only ally of Germany, and it is also the most important ally. In any case, the German Empire can no longer lose this ally. At least, this ally cannot be lost until Germany has won a decisive victory. Therefore, even if Qin Tian was dissatisfied, he would not explode. Boom. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Qin Tian said. "Your Highness." Brigadier General Manstein walked in. "Sit down." "What's the matter?" Qin Tian asked his favorite general with a pleasant face. In Qin Tian's plan, Manstein's talent in staff operations will be brought into play bit by bit. In the future, he even hopes that Manstein can serve as the chief of staff of the German army. "Your Highness, the generals of the Austro-Hungarian Empire don't seem to be in a hurry. Don't they know that the Russian Southwest Front Army has regrouped 4 armies? In addition, there is another Russian army that will arrive soon. At that time, they will have to face the attack of more than 1 million Russian troops." Manstein was a little puzzled. After the Northwest Front Army of the Russian Army was completely wiped out, the Southwest Front Army of the Russian Army was given more attention. Each group army is a full-scale group army with more than 300,000 troops. Once the 5 armies of the Russian Southwest Front Army are all gathered, it will be a huge army with nearly 1.5 million people. On the Eastern Front, the Austro-Hungarian Empire only had 3 armies, with a maximum of 1 million soldiers. Moreover, they were continuously defeated by the Russians in the previous battles, with great losses, and the combat morale of the troops was also very low. It seems that the generals of the Austro-Hungarian Empire pinned their hopes on us. The burden on our shoulders is very heavy, Qin Tian said a little speechlessly. Manstein's face was also ugly. He also discovered that the ally of the Austro-Hungarian Empire seemed unreliable. Originally, they cooperated actively, but now, as long as they don't back down, they have to thank God for blessing. Chapter 315, Command. Your Highness, the Russian Southwest Front Army has a strong force, and our allies seem to be unreliable. I'm afraid this battle is not easy to fight. Manstein was a little worried about the next battle. Qin Tian nodded. The next battle is indeed not very favorable. However, in order to realize the plan and win the final victory on the Eastern Front, this battle must be fought. It is indeed difficult. But even so, we must fight this battle and win it. I believe that the Austrian army does not want to lose this battle. Once the battle begins, he will definitely cooperate with us, Qin Tian said. Manstein nodded. Your Highness, shall we hand over the command of this battle to the Austrian army? If we let them command our troops, I'm afraid that not only will we not be able to win, but we will suffer heavy losses. How is this possible? There has never been a precedent for the Austrian army to command us. I will talk to them this afternoon about the issue of command. It would be best if the Austrian army could hand over command. If they refuse, if the command is handed over, then everyone can only cooperate with each other. As for whether the cooperation is tight, it depends on them. However, I think we should not have too much expectations for this, Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Highness. Manstein felt more and more that this battle was not easy to fight. But at the same time, he also knew that this battle had to be fought and had to be won. Only in this way can the German Empire win the victory on the Eastern Front and change the current unfavorable situation. Qin Tian rested for an hour. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the joint combat meeting between Germany and Austria officially started. In the conference room of the Austrian Army Command, the two parties sat down on both sides of the long table. However, there were several people sitting on the side of the Austrian army. On the German side, apart from Qin Tian, there was only one young Manstein. The Germans actually only sent 2 people to the Joint Operations Conference. They are simply belittling us. Crown Prince Carol was very upset when he saw that there were only Qin Tian and Manstein on the other side of the conference table. In his view, this is clearly the Germans' contempt for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In addition, Germany only deployed 1/8 army on the long Eastern Front, and the other troops were deployed on the Western Front. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had to deploy millions of troops on the Eastern Front. This is clearly the Germans using them to fight with the Russians, in order to reap the benefits. It is precisely because of this view that Crown Prince Carol is very dissatisfied with Germany from the bottom of his heart. If the Austro-Hungarian Empire is now in his hands, it is estimated that he will directly lead the Austro-Hungarian Empire out of this war and let Germany fight alone. His Royal Highness Oscar, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is grateful to Germany for sending reinforcement to us at a critical moment. His Majesty believes that the army led by His Highness will definitely defeat the Russians. In addition, His Majesty hopes that His Highness can visit Vienna at an appropriate time. His Majesty looks forward to meet you. Archduke Friedrich had a smile on his face. Your Excellency is too polite. Please tell His Majesty the Austrian Emperor that after this war is over, I will definitely visit Vienna. Qin Tian replied with a smile. He knew very well that Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria would not live long. Once the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I passed away, and Crown Prince Carol succeeded him as Carol I, the relationship between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire would probably retreat significantly. This made Qin Tian hope that this war would preferably end before the death of Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I. In this way, even if the attitude of the Austro-Hungarian Empire towards Germany changes, Germany will be able to handle all this with ease. His Royal Highness Oscar, does the German Empire have any plans for this battle against the Russian Southwest Front? Asked Marshal Herzendorf, Chief of Staff of the Austrian Army. Your Excellency Chief of Staff, the 8th Army of the German Army has been heading to the front line one after another. It is estimated that within 3 days, it will arrive at the predetermined position. 3 days later, that is, on October 7th, the 8th Army will move from the north to the southwest of the Russian Army. The front army launched an offensive. Our primary attack target is the 4th Army of the Russian Southwest Front. After defeating the 4th Army, we will turn to attack eastward and threaten the rear of the main force of the Russian Southwest Front. We hope that the Austro-Hungarian Empire the army can launch an attack on the frontal battlefield, cooperate with us in fighting, and defeat the Russian Southwest Front army in one fell swoop. Qin Tian said. Got If I heard correctly, His Highness Oscar wants the German 8th Army to defeat the Russian 4th Army first, and then cut off the retreat of the remaining 3 main Russian armies, and eat them all at once. Baron Herzendorf exclaimed. The other Austrian generals were also shocked. In their view, the appetite of these Germans was too great. Crown Prince Carol's face was full of contempt. In his opinion, Qin Tian is clearly bragging. Are the Russians that easy to deal with? If it could be defeated so easily, the Austro-Hungarian Empire would not be forced into what it is now. His Royal Highness Oscar, the Russian Southwest Front Army we are facing, has 4 main armies with a total strength of more than 1 million soldiers. How could they be defeated so easily? Crown Prince Carol asked. Of course, the Russian army is very strong, but we are not weak either. I think that, no matter how strong the Russian Southwest Front Army is, it will not be much stronger than the Russian Army Northwest Front Army. We also wiped out the Russian army in the previous battle. The Northwest Front Army is here. Qin Tian still kept a smile on his face, appearing very humble and polite. But Crown Prince Carol believed that Qin Tian was clearly showing off the combat effectiveness of the German 8th Army, and even mocking the Austrian army. A corps of the German army faced the northwest front of the Russian army, and achieved a brilliant victory, but the Austrian army was beaten all over the place by the Russians. Suddenly, Crown Prince Carol's expression turned a little ugly, but he has no way to refute who made the performance of the German army on the Eastern Front so dazzling, and the Austrian army so incompetent. This made him, the Crown Prince, unable to straighten his back at all. His Royal Highness Oscar, how sure is your army of this battle? Archduke Friedrich asked. At least 50% sure. If the Austrian army can fully cooperate with us in this battle, our chances of winning will be even greater. Therefore, I hope that in this battle, the Austrian army can obey my command. Qin Tian said. Chapter 316. Fully cooperate. What? Follow your command. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Crown Prince Carol jumped up, his face full of anger, as if he had heard something insulting him. However, the other generals of the Austrian army also felt a little shocked. Their reaction was not as intense as that of Crown Prince Carol. After Qin Tian saw Crown Prince Carol's reaction, he couldn't help frowning. He faintly felt that Crown Prince Carol seemed to be very disgusted with him, and even had a hostile feeling. This made Qin Tian somewhat puzzled. He couldn't remember where he had offended Crown Prince Carol. His Royal Highness Carol, now our 2 countries are fighting together, and the Austrian army is fully cooperating with us. Is there nothing to be surprised about? Manstein asked. Damn, arrogant German. Can even a small brigadier question me? Crown Prince Carol was even more angry. However, he obviously couldn't express his true thoughts. In that case, it would not only seriously affect the relationship between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire, but also make him questioned by the generals. Even Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria would have a bad impression of him. After all, it is still a period of close cooperation between Germany and Austria. Taking a deep breath, Crown Prince Carol suppressed the anger in his heart, and began to justify himself. First, I have some doubts about the battle plan you proposed. Would such a plan be too risky? The fighting power of the Russians, not weak. Second, the German army only sent 1 legion, with less than 200,000 people participating in the battle. And we have 3 armies, with nearly 1 million people. Even if it is a joint operation, I'm afraid that the German army should obey our command. His Royal Highness, this battle plan is not risky. We dare to propose this battle plan, which means we are confident in it. The Russian army's combat effectiveness is indeed not weak, but our 8th army is even stronger. We can easily defeat any Russian army. Brigadier General Manstein looked confident and proud. This kind of self-confidence and pride is absolutely absent from the generals of the Austrian army. Of course, the main reason is that they simply don't have the confidence to defeat the Russians on the battlefield. Before, they were beaten all over the ground by the Russians, and they had already lost a lot. As for the Austrian army, which has more troops than us, but obeys our command, it's no big deal. This is a time of war, and any strategy that will help us win this war can be tried. What's more, in the next battle, we will undertake the most important combat missions, and the Austrian army should cooperate with us, right? Brigadier General Manstein continued. Crown Prince Carol was ashamed and angry, and was questioned by a small brigadier general of the German army, which made his face not know where to put it. A group of generals of the Austrian army, although somewhat reluctant in their hearts, but they had to admit that what Brigadier General Manstein said made a lot of sense. Moreover, in the previous battles, it has been proved that the Austrian army is not the opponent of the Russian army at all. If you want to defeat the Russians, you can only rely on the German army. Since the Germans are so confident about the next battle, it seems that it is not unacceptable for the Austrian army to obey the command of the German army and fully cooperate with them. They also couldn't figure out why Crown Prince Carol's reaction was so big. Therefore, this also makes them do not know how to answer. Archduke Friedrich couldn't help sighing. Is the gap between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire already that big? Not only are the abilities of the crown princes of the two sides very different, even a small German empire brigadier generals have such abilities. It seems that it is not unreasonable for the German Empire to surpass us. I think back then, before the Prussian-Austrian War, Austria was the most powerful of the many states in Germany. However, the sudden rise of the Kingdom of Prussia and the defeat of Austria in the Austro-Prussian War prevented Austria from remaining in the German Federation. The comprehensive national strength of the current German Empire far exceeds that of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so that they can only hold a candle to it, and are willing to be the younger brother of the German Empire. His Royal Highness Oscar. We have no doubts about the combat effectiveness of the German 8th Army. We also believe that His Highness can lead the German 8th Army to defeat the Russians. However, the next battle is really important. If we cannot win, this will cause the Austro-Hungarian Empire to suffer huge losses, and even lead to a major defeat on the Eastern Front, and the consequences will be very serious. Therefore, we hope that Your Highness will be more cautious, and not rashly launch an attack. Archduke Friedrich said, Your Excellency, the launch of the next campaign was discussed and demonstrated by the German General Staff. We believe that now is the best chance to defeat the Russian army. The war broke out until now, and Russia's mobilization has not yet been completed. Although, there are already a lot of Russian reserve troops on the battlefield, but they are only a small number of troops. Once the Russian army is mobilized, the consequences may be even more serious. At that time, we will face more Russian troops. In that case, the situation will become even more unfavorable to us. Therefore, before this winter, it is our only chance to defeat the Russian army. If it continues, it will become more and more unfavorable to us. Qin Tian said. Archduke Friedrich nodded, and the other Austrian generals also seemed to agree. Only Crown Prince Carol felt a little anxious. Why are these Austrian generals biased toward the Germans? In that case, wouldn't the command be handed over to others? Your Highness, is the German army really sure of winning the next battle? Baron Herzendorf also looked solemn. Of course. I believe that we will be able to defeat the Russians. On that day, the prerequisite is that we cooperate closely, Qin Tian said with a smile. He already felt that these Austrian generals were about to be persuaded by him. Although, letting millions of Austrian troops obey the command of less than 200,000 German troops made them feel a little uncomfortable. However, they are more eager for victory. If the Russians can be defeated, then even obeying the command of the German army is no big deal. Your Excellency, I think we should consider the overall situation, Baron Marshal Herzendorf said. Your Excellency, Chief of Staff. Crown Prince Carol was a little anxious. However, Archduke Friedrich nodded. In this case, Your Highness Oscar, in the next battle, the Austrian army will fully cooperate with the German army. We hope that we can win this battle. Chapter 317. Facing the Great Enemy. Belarus. Stevka, Russian Army Command. Because the occupation was not going well, Grand Duke Nicholas, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army, had already arrived here from St. Petersburg and personally took command of the Russian army's battle on the front line. However, the losses of the Russian army on the front line are still very astonishing. The Northwest Front Army lost 4 successive armies, more than 900,000 people, and they were all elite standing troops. Such a heavy loss has reached the point where the Russian army is shattered. If it weren't for the gradual mobilization of the Russian army might have failed long ago. The Russian Southwest Front Army, although still has the advantage, but the loss is also not small. If the losses of the two front armies are added up, the Russian army has lost more than 1 million people in this war. Even if the Russian army has more troops, it will not last long under such a loss. General Ivanov, according to the exact information we have received, the German 8th Army has already moved south and will soon arrive at the battlefield to launch an attack on the Southwest Front Army. The Southwest Front Army is ready to meet the Germans. Is it? Grand Duke Nicholas looked solemn. Although the 8th Army of the German army was only a force of less than 200,000 people, the heavy casualties they caused to the Russian army made the generals of the Russian army tremble with fear. If it is said what opponents these Russian generals are most afraid of fighting, then the German 8th Army is definitely the first to bear the brunt. The four Russian armies were successively defeated and annihilated by the German 8th Army. Such a record is enough to scare these generals. Your Excellency the Grand Duke, when will the 13th Army arrive on the battlefield? Admiral Ivanov asked. Originally, the Southwest Front Army had 5 armies under its jurisdiction, namely the Russian 3rd Army, 4th Army, 8th Army, 9th Army and 11th Army. However, because of the disastrous defeat of the Northwest Front Army, the Russian army had to transfer the 9th Army to the north to reinforce the Northwest Front Army. But I didn't expect that letting the 9th Army go north would be death. Now, there are only 4 army groups left in the Southwest Front Army. Relying on the strength of these 4 armies, Admiral Ivanov is confident of defeating the Austro-Hungarian Empire. If he receives further reinforcement and the logistical support can keep up, it will definitely not be difficult to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire. However, when he met a German 8th Army that wiped out nearly 1 million Russian troops, he felt a little uncertain. After the disastrous defeat of the Northwest Front Army, General Ivanov also organized staff to evaluate the combat effectiveness of the German 8th Army. In the end, it was concluded that, if the Russian army wanted to resist the attack of the German 8th Army, at least 2 full-staffed main army groups would be needed, which would be 600,000 people. It is more than 3 times the size of the German 8th Army. Another double would be needed if the German 8th Army was to be defeated. You know, even the Russian Southwest Front Army, there are only so many troops in total now. Obviously, it is impossible to use all of them to deal with the German 8th Army. The Austro-Hungarian Empire still has several armies deployed on the front line, which is not for show. Although the combat effectiveness of the Austro-Hungarian army is not strong, if the German army restrains the main force of the Russian army, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will definitely not let go of this good opportunity to defeat the Russian army. After all, the weapons and equipment of the Austro-Hungarian army are still very sophisticated, even better than the Russian army. The industrial strength of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was already much stronger than that of Russia. The 13th Army, I have ordered them to speed up. However, it will take half a month at the earliest to reach the battlefield. Moreover, because the 13th Front Army is a newly formed force, many weapons and equipment are not in place. The artillery only half, and the machine gun is only 2/3. Grand Duke Nicholas said helplessly. Although Russia can mobilize millions of troops, it is undoubtedly very difficult for them to arm these millions of troops. If you have enough time, maybe you can slowly equip. But it is a pity that the military situation is urgent now, and there is not so much time for them. It is precisely because of this that Grand Duke Nicholas had to send many unarmed troops to the battlefield. Although he knew that this was to send those Russian soldiers to die, he had no other choice. Admiral Ivanov nodded, but the expression on his face became more serious. General Ivanov, the situation in the country is very bad now. Because our army has suffered heavy losses on the front line, the people in the country are excited. Many people blame the imperial government for this. Therefore, we cannot continue to fail. This time, in the face of the joint operations of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Southwestern Front Army must find a way to win. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. I will do my best to help you, Grand Duke Nicholas said. Yes, Your Excellency the Grand Duke. I will definitely do my best. I hope that in addition to the 13th Army being able to arrive at the battlefield as soon as possible, our logistical supplies must be guaranteed. The Germans are very powerful. Not only the firepower is strong, and the assault capability is abnormal. If we can't even guarantee logistical support, we will be even more unable to fight against them. General Ivanov said. Grand Duke Nicholas nodded. The poor logistics support system of the Russian army has always been criticized by people. In a fierce battle, if the army's logistics cannot be guaranteed, there is no way to fight this battle. General Ivanov, you must be very clear about our actual situation. Regarding logistical support, I'm under a lot of pressure. However, in view of the current situation, I will do my best to provide logistical support to the Southwest Front Army. Nico Grand Duke La said. Yes, Your Excellency the Grand Duke. Admiral Ivanov nodded. By the way, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, the German 8th Army has gone south. Why don't we send troops to attack East Prussia? This is a good opportunity. Ivanov said. It would be great if it could be used to force the German 8th Army back. Grand Duke Nicholas shook his head. Because of the heavy losses, we don't have any extra troops to rebuild the Northwest Front Army. It is estimated that the Northwest Front Army will not be rebuilt until next spring. In addition, the Germans have long been prepared. A large number of armies are gathering towards East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland to fill the gap left by the 8th Army going south. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, Adventurous Tactics. General Ivanov, the commander of the Russian Southwest Front Army, left Stevka and rushed back to his frontline headquarters in Stry by night. However, on the way back, his expression was very ugly. As a frontline commander, he probably would have such an expression when he encountered a formidable enemy like the German 8th Army. After all, the German 8th Army has proved their strength to the world with their dazzling record. Even General Ivanov was worried that his army would be quickly defeated under the attack of the German 8th Army. After rushing back to Stry, Admiral Ivanov immediately summoned the officers of the Front Army Staff Headquarters and asked them to discuss a set of tactics against the German 8th Army. Then, non-stop summoned the commanders of the various armies under the Southwest Front Army. In any case, the German 8th Army is about to launch an attack on them. This is a big event, and they must resist the German attack. You have to find a way to win this battle. Otherwise, all their previous efforts would have been in vain. Gentlemen, we are in big asterisk trouble this time. The German 8th Army is heading south, and the target is us. Admiral Ivanov looked at his generals and said bitterly, the 8th Army? Is that the German 8th Army that killed the entire Northwest Front? A Russian general asked in horror. He was the commander of the Russian 4th Army, General Dmitriev. His 4th Army is located at the northernmost point of the entire Southwest Front Army, which means that once the German 8th Army launches an attack, his 4th Army may be the first to bear the brunt of the German 8th Army's attack target. The 4 armies of the Northwest Front Army were all eaten by the German 8th Army, which undoubtedly proved the powerful combat effectiveness of the German 8th Army. General Dmitriev absolutely does not think that his 4th Army can withstand the attack of the German 8th Army. Although the German 4th Army has a strength of more than 300,000 troops, the strength of the German 8th Army is only about 60% of the Russian 4th Army. Are the Germans going to intervene in the battle between us and the Austro-Hungarian Empire? The other generals also showed embarrassment. In the previous battles between the Southwest Front Army and the Austro-Hungarian Army, they had always had the upper hand, making the Austro-Hungarian Empire powerless to resist. This made the generals of the Russian army very happy. After all, the industrial strength of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the weapons and equipment of the army are stronger than them. Winning against such an opponent is undoubtedly something worth showing off. But now, the Germans are coming. Then, everything changes. If they don't deal with it properly, maybe they will lose this battle. This is not good news for them. General, the German 8th Army has gone south. Don't they need to defend East Prussia? General Ruski, commander of the Russian 3rd Army, asked. The Germans assembled other armies in East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland to prepare for our attack. The Northwest Front suffered too much losses this time, and our mobilization has not yet been completed. Therefore, we simply do not have extra strength to attack the East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland. Now, the most important issue before us is how to resist the attack of the German 8th Army. If we can't resist, I won't say the consequences, and everyone knows it very well. Ivano General Husband said, "General, how can we resist it? The 1st Army, the 2nd Army, the 9th Army and the 2nd Guards Army were eliminated by the German 8th Army within a month or so. They are so powerful, if we want to resist their attack, we may have to send the entire Southwest Front Army. Otherwise, it will be impossible to resist the attack of the German 8th Army." Commander of the Russian 8th Army General Brushinov shook his head. "Yes, General. The tank troops of the others have extremely strong assault capabilities. And we have no weapons to counter German tanks, according to the information obtained before, unless it is a direct hit by a large caliber shell. Otherwise, only the soldiers carried the explosives and launched a suicide attack on the German tanks." General Sirivanov, commander of the Russian 11th Army, said helplessly. After the defeat of the Northwest Front Army, all kinds of information about the German 8th Army were continuously gathered into the hands of the Russian generals. The strength of the German 8th Army shocked them greatly. Of course, what attracted their attention the most was undoubtedly the 8th Armored Division of the German Army, which made a big splash in this battle. However, even now, the Russian army has no way to deal with the German armored forces, and this puts them at a disadvantage in battle, as for the German tank units, the military factories in the rear are already working hard. We are also contacting Britain and France to seek weapons from them to deal with the German tank units. However, these are not available for the time being. Therefore, we can only find ways to deal with the German 8th Army. I believe that, no matter how strong the German 8th Army is, no matter how strong its combat effectiveness is, however, our Southwest Front Army is not so easy to deal with. We will not be like the Northwest Front Army, easily defeated." General Ivanov said. "Yes, General." All the Russian generals replied. However, from the expressions on their faces, Admiral Ivanov could still see their guilty conscience. Soon, the staff of the Russian Southwest Front Army came up with 2 sets of battle plans. One set tends to be conservative, but the other set is very bold, and can even be described as adventurous. The conservative tactic is to require the Russian Southwest Front Army to enter a comprehensive defensive combat posture and gather 2 armies to deal with the attack of the German 8th Army. The other 2 armies responded to the Austrian attack. Wait until the 13th Army arrives before planning a counterattack. It's just that it's hard to say whether the 2 armies can withstand the attack of the German 8th Army. Another set of bold battle plans is to use one army group to withstand the attack of the German 8th Army, and the other 3 army groups will attack the Austrian army with all their strength and strive to defeat the Austrian army before the German 8th Army wins the victory, thus gaining the battlefield victory. Once the Austrian army is completely defeated, the Southwest Front will be able to gather the main force to deal with the German 8th Army. At that time, there may not be no chance of winning. Chapter 319. Ivanov's determination. Admiral Ivanov frowned tightly. It was undoubtedly extremely difficult for him to choose between the 2 battle plans submitted by the Front Army Staff Headquarters. "Everyone, the battle plan of the Staff Department has come out. Take a look. Which one should we choose?" Admiral Ivanov asked. "General, if you want to be safe, the first battle plan is naturally the most suitable. However, it is hard to say whether the 2 armies can withstand the attack of the German 8th Army. In addition, this will also make the battlefield fall into a crisis. The stalemate situation. All the advantages we had originally were lost," Admiral Rusky said. Admiral Ivanov nodded. They managed to inflict heavy damage on the Austrian army during the war. Seeing that they were able to inflict further heavy damage on them, and even defeat them, they won the war. However, the Germans came out at this time. If you give up, it will fall short. Admiral Ivanov himself was also very reluctantly. If we choose the second battle plan, can we quickly defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire? Admiral Ivanov asked. The reason why the second battle plan is risky is that the Russian Army Group army simply cannot withstand the attack of the German 8th Army. In that case, they would be caught between the German and Austrian forces. At that time, I'm afraid that not only will the advantage be completely lost, but it will even make them fall into an extremely disadvantageous situation. General, this is very difficult. The Austro-Hungarian Empire also deployed 3 armies on the front line, and their strength is not much smaller than ours. It is very difficult to defeat them in a short time. In addition, after the Germans arrived, Austria-Hungary, the morale of the army will inevitably rise. This will increase the difficulty of defeating them, said General Dmitriev. General, although there are difficulties, I think that, if we go well, we may not have no chance of defeating the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Before, we could suppress them. Now, the three armies of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the front line are mostly dissatisfied. If we attack with all last strength, we have a chance of defeating them. As long as we defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we can gather the main force to besiege the Germans. The German 8th Army is powerful, but if our 4 armies besiege them, then we will have avenged our shame and won the entire battlefield. General Brushinov, commander of the Russian 8th Army, said excitedly. He is a person who likes to take risks and hopes to get the greatest benefit through taking risks. The current battle situation is the same for the Russian army. If you can take a little risk in exchange for a chance to win the war completely, in the eyes of General Brushinov, this is undoubtedly a very good deal. Of course, if the war is lost, the consequences will undoubtedly be very miserable. At that time, they will lose completely. Admiral Ivanov, it was in consideration of this point that he was a little hesitant. He wanted to seize this opportunity to defeat the German and Austrian armies in one fell swoop and win the Russian Empire on the battlefield. However, if he failed, the consequences would not be something he could bear. General, I think we can choose the second battle plan. Although it is a bit risky, once we win, it will completely change the situation on the battlefield. We will however have an advantage in this war. Even completely defeat our enemy. General Sirivanov, commander of the Russian 11th Army, also expressed his opinion. As a general, it is understandable and a very important quality to be cautious when commanding a war. It is absolutely impossible to lose the spirit of adventure. You must know that many major victories in the history of war were obtained after taking risks. If you blindly pursue caution, you will miss your opportunity. Everyone's eyes fell on General Ivanov, waiting for him to make the final decision. General Ivanov also felt tremendous pressure. After all, his choice is not only related to the life and death of millions of troops of the Russian Southwest Front Army, but also related to whether Russia can win this war, which is undoubtedly very important. General Dmitriev, can your troops survive the German attack for half a month? Admiral Ivanov asked. He seemed to have made up his mind and made a decision. General, this is very difficult. The Germans are too powerful. Once their tank troops launch an attack, our troops may not be able to resist at all. The defense line we built will be easily torn apart by the Germans. Admiral Dmitriev swallowed hard. At the thought of resisting the attack of the mighty German 8th Army, he couldn't help feeling tense. The German tank troops are powerful, but we can use other methods to stop them. For example, build strong fortifications. The headquarters believes that we can prevent the German tanks from advancing by digging wider trenches. This may be useful in our defensive operations. General Ivanov said. Yes, General. However, half a month may not be enough to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? Admiral Dmitriev said. After you persist for half a day, the 13th Army will arrive. At that time, the 13th Army will cooperate with you to resist the German attack. The remaining 3 armies will strive to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the shortest possible time. This is our only chance. If we can defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we will win this battle. Otherwise, we will lose a complete defeat. Admiral Ivanov said. Yes, General. We will do our best to stop the Germans. Admiral Dmitriev said. He knew that Admiral Ivanov had already made up his mind, and it was useless to say anything else, only to do his best to complete the combat mission. I will report the battle plan to Grand Duke Nicholas. If His Excellency approves our battle plan, then launch an attack immediately. The time left for us is running out. We must seize this opportunity, just do it. General Ivanov said. Yes, General. All the Russian generals replied loudly. Everyone knows that, since Admiral Ivanov has chosen this risky battle plan, everyone has to work hard. This is not only related to whether Russia can win the war, but also related to their vital interests, even their lives. If you win, promotion and fortune are indispensable. But if it fails, I'm afraid it will be dead. Chapter 320, The attack begins. After Grand Duke Nicholas got the Southwest Front Army's combat plan, he also thought about it for a long time. He was taken aback that Admiral Ivanov planned to carry out such a risky battle plan. However, he also had to admit that this was the only chance for Russia to reverse the situation and win. If the Southwest Front Army's combat plan is successful, then the situation on the entire battlefield will be changed. Russia will have an absolute advantage on the Eastern Front, and even directly threaten the hinterland of the Germans, making this war more beneficial to the Allied powers. But if it fails, the Russian army will probably suffer a crushing defeat on the Eastern Front. After losing more than 2 million troops, even Russia, which has a strong military force, will be shattered. Of course, if Russia is given a period of time to breathe, Russia can still pull up millions of troops. However, in this process, the fall of a large area of territory may be unavoidable. In that case, it would be difficult to explain to Tsar Nicholas II how to choose. Grand Duke Nicholas is also a little embarrassed. After much deliberation, he still approved Admiral Ivanov's battle plan. After all, he couldn't give up the temptation to gain a decisive advantage on the Eastern Front. After the disastrous defeat of the Northwest Front, the situation on the Eastern Front was no longer favorable to Russia. If there is no way to reverse the situation, Russia may lose in this war. In addition, if the Southwest Front Army can win this time, Tsar Nicholas II will probably be very happy. The previous successive failures made Nicholas II very angry. Admiral Ivanov took action immediately after the battle plan was approved. The 3rd Army, 4th Army, 8th Army, and 11th Army under the Southwest Front began frequent mobilization. The 4th Army built a defensive position on the front lines of Chiemenzamo in the southeast of Lublin. The 3rd Army, the 8th Army, and the 11th Army further advanced to the Carpathian Mountains. As long as they crossed the mountains, they would be on the Hungarian plain of the platform. The Russian army can directly threaten the hinterland of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The change of the Russian Southwest Front Army made the Austrian army stationed in the Carpathian Mountains very nervous. The Carpathian Mountains are already their last line of defense. If even the Carpathian Mountains cannot stop the Russians, the flames of war will burn to the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This will be a heavy blow to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His Royal Highness, the Russian Southwest Front Army has begun to approach our defense line. It is expected that an attack will be launched soon. Baron Herzendorf Marshal looked serious. Qin Tian nodded. The Russians are not fools either. Our 8th Army's going south has aroused their vigilance. However, I didn't expect them to choose such a way to confront us. At first, I thought they would concentrate forces to defend our 8th Army. But now it seems that the commander of the Russian army is still a very courageous person, and he actually wants to use this head-to-head method to fight us. Crown Prince Karol and Archduke Friedrich have already returned to Vienna. Without that eye-catching guy, Qin Tian has also relaxed a lot. Of course, a large reason why Crown Prince Karol left the front line was because Marshal Herzendorf told him that once the battle started, Uzhhorod, where they were located, would be very dangerous, and it was very likely that the Russians would attack primary goal. If the battle on the front line is unfavorable, the Russian army is very likely to come here. Therefore, Baron Marshal Herzendorf asked Crown Prince Karol to return to Vienna so that it would be safer. When Crown Prince Karol heard that Uzhhorod might become the front line, his handsome face turned pale with fright. He left Uzhhorod the next day and returned to Vienna without saying a word. Crown Prince Karol's faction naturally made the generals of the Austrian army very speechless. If there is no comparison, they may still think that Crown Prince Karol is not bad. However, compared with Qin Tian, i.e., there is one heaven and one earth. Your Highness, will this adversely affect our plan? Baron Herzendorf was a little worried. This time, they gambled their future fate. If the situation is unfavorable, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will be miserable. Don't worry, Your Excellency the Marshal. I was worried that the Russians would stand by and wait for help. In this case, it would make it more difficult for us to defeat them. But now, since the Russians dare to take the initiative to attack, it is relatively easy to defeat them. It will be much simpler. Qin Tian looked very confident. Your Excellency Marshal, can the 3 armies of your army hold the defense line of the Carpathian Mountains? It will take at least half a month for the 8th Army to defeat the Russian Fourth Army and outflank the Russian army's retreat. Qin Tian said with a serious face. If the Austrian army can't even hold on to this, then this battle may not be able to continue. His Royal Highness, if you just blindly defend yourself, there is no problem at all for half a month. Marshal Herzendorf replied. After all, after the 4th Army of the Russian army was attacked by the 8th Army of the German army, the troops used by the Russian army to attack them were only 3 armies. Everyone has equal strength and the Austrian army still has the upper hand in weapons. If the Austrian army fails to withstand the Russian attack, then the generals of the Austrian army should be ashamed and commit suicide one by one. Qin Tian nodded. That's good. When the Austrian army is fully defending the Carpathian Mountains, the 8th Army will launch a fierce attack on the Russian army. At that time, we will cut off the retreat of the Russian army and cut off the logistics supply line. This battle will become much easier to fight. Marshal Baron Herzendorf nodded. Since Qin Tian is full of confidence in this, it seems that he has nothing to worry about. Tomorrow, the 8th Army will launch an attack on the 4th Army of the Russian army. The defense of the Carpathians depends on the Austrian army. I hope that we can achieve a perfect victory in this battle. Qin Tian said. Don't worry, Your Highness the Crown Prince. The Austrian army will definitely last until that day, Marshal Herzendorf said with a smile. On October 7, 1914, the 8th Army of the German Imperial Army launched officially an attack on the 4th Army of the Russian army. At the same time, the 3 armies of the Austrian army entered the Carpathian Mountains defense line to strengthen the defense line and prevent the Russian army from attacking. Chapter 321, Offense. Qin, one of the 2 strategically important places where the Russian 4th Army is stationed. The 4th Army has deployed a full 100,000 people here, which is already equivalent to 1/3 of all the troops of the entire 4th Army. In addition, in Zamo, they also deployed 100,000 people. The last 100,000 people will be used as a reserve team. General Dmitriev, commander of the Russian 4th Army, even placed his headquarters in Chelm. The reason is to hope to be able to resist the German attack at this critical strategic node. General, the Germans have begun to prepare for the attack. It is expected that their attack will begin soon. The adjutant reported to Admiral Dmitriev. Hearing the news, Admiral Dmitriev couldn't help feeling tense. Even though he had expected it a long time ago, this day was inevitable. But what I didn't expect was that it would come so soon. Admiral Dmitriev can be regarded as a half-length military veteran. His years of military career have made him used to seeing life and death. Even in the face of great danger, he can still maintain his composure. But unfortunately, facing the German attack now, he couldn't hide the tension on his face, even panic. Order all troops and prepare for battle. The 22nd Army and the 34th Army are ready for reinforcement at any time. Admiral Dmitriev ordered. Yes, General. The adjutant nodded, also looking as if he was facing a big enemy. How is our defense line prepared? Especially the anti-tank trenches against German tanks. Have you dug them? Admiral Dmitriev asked. Digging wide anti-tank trenches has become the only way the Russian army can think of when facing German tanks. In the absence of weapons to deal with German tanks, the only way to stop them is to use this kind of trench with a width of 3 meters. Although the Russian army's soil work has never been very good, there is no difficulty in such a simple matter as digging trenches. All you need is for the officers to drive the soldiers to dig with fatigue. General, the anti-tank trenches have been dug. They are all 3-meter wide trenches according to your requirements. If the German tanks come again this time, they will definitely not be able to pass. The adjutant said excitedly. Well, very good. I hope God bless us. This time we must resist the German attack. Admiral Dmitriev also showed a smile on his face. Admiral Dmitriev is most worried about the German tank unit. In his view, although the German army is powerful, if the tank troops are excluded, the attack power is not too strong. As long as the German tank unit is resisted, then it should be able to resist the German attack. Although it may not be possible to defeat the German army, it should not be a big problem to persist under the German attack. On the position of the 17th Army of the German Army, Lieutenant General Zeckert, the commander of the army, is observing the position of the Russian army with a telescope. The infantry divisions of the German 17th Army have already begun to prepare for the attack. The soldiers were queuing up to receive breakfast, and the quartermaster also distributed the bullets to every soldier. A group of generals stood behind Lieutenant General Eckert. The Russians are clearly prepared. Even the anti-tank trenches have been dug. Colonel Rommel, it seems that you are in big trouble this time. Lieutenant General Eckert put down the binoculars in his hand and said with a smile, "General, it's not a big trouble, it's just a few minor problems. At least, until the Russians have weapons that can destroy our tanks. Our biggest trouble is still a mechanical failure. During the battle, because of a mechanical failure there are far more tanks destroyed than those destroyed by the enemy." Colonel Rommel said disdainfully. Rommel is now the deputy commander of the 8th Armored Division and the head of the 1st Regiment, and his rank has also been promoted to colonel. However, it is said that he will not last long in the 8th Armored Division. After this battle is over, he will serve as the commander of the 9th Armored Division that is being formed. At that time, I'm afraid that the military rank will be promoted again and become brigadier general. Although he is only 23 years old now, his outstanding talents and the high regard for him by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince make him very likely to become the youngest general in the history of the German army. This time, the 8th Armored Division was split into two halves, and Colonel Rommel led a part to assist the 17th Army in attacking Qin. Brigadier General Guderian led another part to assist the 20th Army in attacking Zamość. Since this is the case, there should be no problem. Are the infantry divisions ready? Lieutenant General Eckert asked. Colonel Rommel nodded. Through investigation, they had already discovered that the Russian army had dug long anti-tank trenches 100 meters in front of the defense line. The anti-tank trenches with a width of 3 meters made it impossible for German tanks to cross. If you launch an attack, you will definitely be blocked there. But it is a pity that the Russian army does not have anti-tank guns to deal with tanks. Otherwise, this would be enough to make the German armored forces suffer. Therefore, it is not very difficult for the German armored forces to pass through the Russian anti-tank trenches. At that time, it is only necessary to use a few trucks to transport some stones and soil to fill up the Russian anti-tank trenches. The commanders of the other 3 infantry divisions also nodded, expressing that they were ready. 10 minutes later, launched shelling and fire preparations. After half an hour of fire preparations, the armored forces and the 50th Infantry Division launched an attack, tearing apart the German defense line in one fell swoop. Lieutenant General Eckert ordered. "Yes, General." Everyone replied. Everyone knows that this time the war is about to kick off. Whether the German 8th Army can achieve fruitful results again in this battle depends on them. In this battle, the 17th Army of the German Army was the first to launch an attack, and the 20th Army on the other way would not be able to launch an attack until tomorrow. As for the 11th Army, it is used as a reserve force. On the artillery positions of the German army, the artillery of the 3 infantry divisions is ready: 54 150mm heavy howitzers, 108 105mm light howitzers, and 162 75mm field guns have raised their barrels. Fire! Following the order of the artillery commander, the artillery positions immediately started shelling. Boom. Boom. The heavy artillery of each door began to shoot. Under the action of huge kinetic energy, the shell slammed fiercely towards the target. Chapter 322, Artillery Battle. Boom. 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 Shells fell from the sky one after another, hitting the Russian army's position fiercely, and a violent explosion occurred. For a while, smoke and dust rose everywhere, and gunpowder smoke filled the air. On the Russian army's position, it can be said to be a piece of flying sand and rocks. A shell hit a section of the trench, which immediately collapsed the trench by more than 10 meters. A machine gun fire point was hit by a 75mm shell, and amidst the violent explosion, the machine gun fire point was blown away immediately. Before attacking, the German army often makes sufficient firepower preparations. Although this will cause them to consume a large amount of shells, it can most likely destroy the enemy's fortifications and clear the way for subsequent infantry attacks. The defensive positions painstakingly built by the troops of the Russian 4th Army were gradually reduced to ruins under the heavy shelling of the German army. The Russian army's soil work is not very strong, and there is a lack of materials. Therefore, the fortifications of the Russian army could not compete with the artillery fire of the German army at all. Especially those heavy artillery can easily destroy the German fortifications. In order to preserve its own strength to the greatest extent, the Russian Fourth Army dug a lot of anti-gun holes on the line of defense. After the German bombardment was over, they drilled out of the anti-battery hole to attack the attacking German army. It's just that the defense of the Russian army's anti-blasting holes seems to be unqualified. This made their defense seem a little powerless when resisting the German shelling. Boom. A 105mm artillery shell exploded above a Russian artillery hole. The violent explosion caused the blast hole to shake violently. At the same time, the soil kept falling from the top of the blast hole, making that frightening sound of killing. Got. The German bombardment is more terrifying than the legends. Can our artillery holes withstand the German bombardment? A Russian soldier said with a pale face. Although, before the battle began, they had already heard of the horrors of the German artillery bombardment. However, it was not until now that they were encountering the shelling of the German army that they knew that the shelling of the German army was stronger than they expected. Boom. Another heavy artillery shell hit the Russian army's artillery hole. And, this time it was the shells fired by the 150mm heavy howitzer. Under the tremendous power of the shell explosion, huge cracks suddenly appeared on the top of the blast hole. The faces of the Russian soldiers hiding inside changed drastically. Got. The bomb defense hole is about to collapse. Run away. The soldiers scrambled to drill towards the opening of the anti-blasting hole, but the opening was narrow, which greatly restricted their speed. At this moment, the earth and rocks on the top have already begun to fall in large chunks. Some Russian soldiers were even beaten to death. But everyone can't care so much anymore. Finding a way to escape from the blast hole is the most important thing. Only in that way can he survive. Otherwise, once the anti-blasting hole collapses, everyone will be finished. Boom. A huge piece of earth and rock fell, blocking the opening of the blast hole. The livelihood of the Russian soldiers inside was cut off at once. Although, they desperately shouted and asked for help inside, while digging with their hands. But it didn't work at all. Because the earth and rocks on it were still falling, and the blast hole was soon buried. Of the hundreds of Russian soldiers hiding inside, except for a very small number who escaped, the rest were all buried alive inside. This is not an exception, but a common practice. The fortifications of the Russian army are not up to standard, which has caused them to suffer a lot. But even so, the Russian army cannot change this. During the heavy shelling by the German army, the Russian artillery holes were destroyed one after another, and countless Russian soldiers were buried alive in them. The heavy loss caused the Russian generals watching the battle in the rear to frown. General, we can't go on like this. Our artillery can no longer remain silent. Otherwise, the troops on the front line will suffer heavy losses. At that time, what can we do to stop the German attack? A lieutenant general officer said. Can our artillery fight against the Germans? Admiral Dmitriev asked. Even if the 4th Russian army assembled 100,000 people in Chelm, which is a total of 6 infantry divisions, the total number of artillery pieces of these 6 infantry divisions is only 288, and all of them are 76.2mm field artillery. Such strength is obviously unable to confront the German army. Especially among the artillery of the German army, there are quite a few large caliber heavy artillery. The Russian army, even though it was strengthened before the war, only had more than 20 105mm howitzers. The difference in artillery strength between the two sides is too great. General, our artillery is not as good as the Germans. However, if the Germans want to completely suppress us, it is impossible. Our attack on the German artillery positions can at least prevent them from continuing to bombard ours. It's the forward position, said the artillery commander. Admiral Dmitriev nodded. This is undoubtedly the answer he wanted. Order the artillery to fire. We need to stay here for a long time. Therefore, the German artillery must not be allowed to attack our defense line unscrupulously. Admiral Dmitriev ordered. Yes, General. After receiving the order, the artillery commander immediately went to prepare. 10 minutes later, the Russian artillery began shelling. A 76.2mm field gun and more than 20 105mm howitzers began a fierce shelling. Boom. Boom. Orange flames shone at the muzzle, and the shell slammed into the German artillery positions fiercely. However, except for those 75mm field artillery positions, the rest of the 105mm light howitzer positions and 150mm heavy howitzer positions are arranged relatively backward, completely out of the range of the Russian 76.2mm field guns. Therefore, the only things they can threaten are those field artillery positions. But even so, the shelling of the Russian army also caused some losses to the German artillery positions. However, the loss was not that great. The field artillery continued to bombard the Russian artillery positions, light howitzers and heavy howitzers, suppressing the Russian artillery. In addition, send a telegram to the Air Force, and they can launch an attack. Lieutenant General Zeckert gave the order with a blank expression. Yes, General. The communications officer immediately went to give the order. Chapter 323, Air Aid. The German 8th Air Force performed outstandingly in the Polish campaign. In the process of preventing the Russian 9th Army from escaping, their airstrikes not only caused a large number of casualties to the Russian 9th Army, but more importantly, delayed the retreat of the Russian 9th Army. During the frantic pursuit of the German army, it was impossible to evacuate in time. It eventually led to the end of the Russian 9th Army, except for a very small number of generals who escaped, and the rest were annihilated. This time against the Russian Southwest Front, the German 8th Air Force is also an important force of the German 8th Army. For this reason, the 8th Army specially forced tens of thousands of Russian prisoners of war. In the southern part of the Kingdom of Poland, several large airports were built for these planes of the 8th Air Force to take off and land. In this case, in terms of the range of the fighters and bombers of the German 8th Air Force, they can almost participate in the entire battle, which further increases the chances of the German army's victory. The shelling of the German 17th Army had just begun, and the fighter planes of the 8th Air Force had already taken off one after another. It's just that they didn't enter the battlefield immediately, but were waiting for the opportunity. What they waited for was undoubtedly the appearance of a more valuable target for the Russian army. The Russian artillery is undoubtedly a very valuable target. Before the fighter planes of the German 8th Air Force arrived on the battlefield, the German artillery had already begun to suppress the Russian artillery. A pair of 105mm light howitzers and 150mm heavy howitzers attacked the Russian artillery positions under the guidance of observation balloons. Boom. Boom. The artillery shells hit the artillery positions of the Russian army like raindrops, causing very large losses to the Russian army. A Russian 76.2mm field artillery position was attacked by a German 150mm heavy artillery. A series of more than a dozen 150mm artillery shells accurately hit the artillery position. A violent explosion sounded on the battlefield. Black gunpowder smoke enveloped the position. When the gunpowder smoke dissipated, it could be clearly seen that one after another bomb craters appeared on the artillery positions of the Russian army. And those 76.2mm field guns were blown up and down, and even many cannons have been destroyed. As for the loss of the Russian artillery, it goes without saying that under such a fierce shelling, very few of them survived, unless they were really lucky people. Otherwise there was only a dead end. The entire position was covered with the remains of these Russian artillerymen. The heavy artillery of the German army continued to roll call the artillery positions of the Russian army one after another, causing great losses to the Russian army. But even so, the Russian army still did not issue an order to stop the shelling, and they still gritted their teeth and insisted. Because the shelling of the Russian army is not useless. At least, their shelling also destroyed some of the German artillery. Although the quantity is not much, it has made them very satisfied. In addition, under the interference of the Russian army's shelling, the German army's artillery strikes on the Russian army's forward positions were also affected to a certain extent. The loss of artillery made Admiral Dmitriev and others very painful. It would undoubtedly be very cost effective if they could hold out for a longer period of time until the arrival of Russian reinforcement. However, the goals of Admiral Dmitriev and others will soon be shattered, because a large number of German aircraft are about to enter the battlefield. Under the bombing of these aircraft, it is probably very difficult to say how many Russian artillery positions can survive. In the northern sky, small black dots appeared one after another. These small black dots seem to be very slow, but they are actually moving towards the battlefield very quickly. It's just that the Russian army's thoughts are all on the battlefield at the moment, and they didn't find out immediately. These small black dots are all aircraft of the German 8th Air Force, bombers, and fighter jets loaded with bombs. General, the plane of the 8th Air Force has arrived. The adjutant reported to Lieutenant General Eckert. Immediately guide them to attack the Russian artillery positions. This time, the Russian artillery must be eliminated. After the Russian artillery is eliminated, the armored forces and infantry can launch an attack. Lieutenant General Eckert ordered. The artillery of the Russian army has always been the key target of the German army. After solving them, the German armored forces and infantry will be much less threatened when they attack. What is that? A Russian military officer discovered the approaching German aircraft. When they used binoculars and saw the planes and the Iron Cross symbol on the wings, all of them couldn't help but change their faces. My god. The German planes are coming. Hurry up. The German plane has appeared. Take cover immediately. The arrival of the German plane immediately caused the generals of the Russian Fourth Army to change into a mess. According to the information they received, they already knew the power of the German aircraft. After all, the demise of the Russian Ninth Army has an inseparable relationship with these German planes. Admiral Dmitriev and others immediately began to evacuate. They are the commanders of the Russian army. If they suffer heavy losses from the German planes, there will be no way to fight this battle. It's just that when General Dmitriev and others retreated to a safe place, they discovered that the German planes were not aimed at them at all, but at the Russian artillery positions. Ready to attack. Destroy the Russian artillery positions. The commander of the 8th Air Force issued an order. One bomber after another, the first to lower the altitude. When the altitude dropped to 800 meters, these bombers opened their magazines and started dropping bombs. Bombs one after another, like raindrops, fell on the artillery positions of the Russian army. The artillery positions of the Russian army were instantly enveloped by explosions and flames. When the smoke cleared, what appeared in front of everyone was a piece of land like the surface of the moon. As for the artillery of the Russian army, they have already been blown into a pile of scrap iron. Those Russian soldiers were bombed to the point where there was not even a scum left. The bomber unit of the German 8th Air Force began to destroy the Russian artillery positions one by one. The Russian army without anti-aircraft weapons was powerless in the face of German airstrikes. Evacuate. Evacuate immediately. Seeing this scene, Admiral Dmitriev almost gritted his teeth. He immediately ordered the Russian artillery to evacuate. Otherwise, these artillery would probably be killed by German planes. However, it is obviously too late at this time. Chapter 324. Heavy damage. Retreat. Quickly, retreat to the woods to hide. The officers of the Russian army shouted loudly with their throats piercing. During the German airstrikes, the Russian artillery suffered extremely heavy losses. If this continues, I'm afraid that their artillery will be lost. Once all the artillery is lost, it may be even more difficult for them to hold on to the line of defense. It's just that they didn't find out when the German Air Force appeared, and it's undoubtedly too late to evacuate now. The planes of the German Air Force rushed towards the Russian artillery positions like hungry wolves. Those bombers bombed the artillery positions of the Russian army with the bombs they carried, causing huge damage to the Russian army. And those fighter jets are also unwilling to lag behind. Although, under the wings of these fighter jets, they can only carry small bombs. But apart from these small bombs, the aviation machine guns of these fighter jets certainly do not pose much threat to those artillery pieces. However, for those artillerymen, this was a fatal blow. Da-da-da. A fighter jet flew over the retreating Russian artillery, and dense aviation machine gun bullets shot over. A dozen Russian artillery fell into a pool of blood, and the bullets hit the Russian artillery. On the ground, sparks burst out one by one. Ah! Ah! The screams kept ringing, and countless Russian artillerymen were killed under the strafing of German fighter jets. It can be said that the entire battlefield has now completely become a massacre by the German Air Force against the Russian artillery. A large number of Russian artillery was blown up, and countless artillery was shot and killed. The artillery of the Russian Fourth Army deployed in Chelm after this battle can be said to be out of 10. In the ensuing battle, I'm afraid that they will not be able to play any role at all. The fighter planes of the 8th Air Force of the German Army dropped all the bombs and fired all the bullets and left swaggeringly. left behind the devastated Russian artillery positions, and those Russian commanders who wanted to cry, but had no tears. General, our artillery losses are very large. The suppression of German artillery fire, coupled with their airstrikes, caused the loss of more than 80% of our artillery. The artillery commander of the Russian army reported bitterly. Admiral Dmitriev's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. The sudden dispatch of the Air Force by the German army undoubtedly dealt them a heavy blow. The German artillery is very powerful, they are very clear about this. Without the support of their own artillery, this means that their forward positions may encounter crazy attacks from German artillery. This will further cause heavy damage to the Russian army. What's more, it will make them unable to last much time in Chelm. The German planes are really powerful. No wonder the 9th Army was unable to move an inch under the attack of their planes, and was finally chased by the Germans. A Russian general said. Now, the Germans not only have a powerful tank force, but also powerful artillery and aircraft. Can we really hold on here? Another Russian general said with some frustration. Admiral Dmitriev is also somewhat negative. Although, there were only tens of thousands of German troops in Chelm, only about half of their strength. However, the German army undoubtedly has an absolute advantage in terms of technical weapons. This makes it very difficult for them to complete Admiral Ivanov's order, to stick to it for half a month, even if they have an advantage in strength. However, as the commander of the 4th Army, General Dmitriev obviously cannot show a negative attitude. In that case, I'm afraid it will be quite unfavorable for the follow-up operations. If you don't even have confidence, there is no need to fight this battle. Everyone, the Germans are indeed very powerful. However, we are definitely not without a chance. The strength of the Germans has always been their biggest disadvantage. We can use a solid line of defense to resist the Germans. As long as we eliminate them, if they have enough vitality, they will be unable to continue their attack. I have already decided to call up the 22nd Army immediately to reinforce us. At that time, we will have a further advantage in terms of strength, although it is very difficult to defeat the German army. But, if we want to keep Chelm, the problem will definitely not be too big. Admiral Dmitriev said. Yes, General. Encouraged by Admiral Dmitriev, the generals of the Russian army finally regained some confidence. It's just that what they don't know is that their confidence will soon be torn to pieces by the German army. In the position of the German army, Lieutenant General Eckert and others have been watching the performance of the air team. When they saw the Air Force destroying the Russian artillery positions one after another, they couldn't help laughing. General, the Russian artillery is finished. Should we extend our firepower preparation for a while? A major general asked. Lieutenant General Eckert nodded. It will be extended for another half an hour. After half an hour, the armored troops and infantry will be dispatched to tear through the Russian defense line in one fell swoop. Yes, General. Everyone replied. Boom. 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 The artillery fire of the German army is still firing violently, using artillery shells to severely hit the Russian army's position, causing great losses to the Russian army on the position, and destroying the fortifications built by the Russian army, laying a solid foundation for the subsequent armored forces and infantry attacks, creating chances. When the German army's firepower preparations ended, the Russian army's position had become a mess. There are bomb craters everywhere, scattered corpses and broken limbs, and they are flying everywhere. The defense line of the Russian army has been almost destroyed, as if it had been plowed by someone. Attack. At this time, Lieutenant General Eckert, the commander of the German army, gave the order to attack. Hundreds of tanks from the 8th Armored Division drove out of their positions and rushed towards the Russian positions. Behind them were tens of thousands of infantry. More than 100 tanks formed a black torrent of steel and rushed towards the Russian army's position. It is undoubtedly difficult to say whether the Russian defense line can withstand the attack of the German armored forces. You must know that even the intact Russian defense line may not be able to withstand it, let alone these dilapidated defensive positions. The final result is undoubtedly obvious. Come on. Tear through the Russian defenses, crush them, and kill them. Colonel Rommel, sitting in the command vehicle, gave the order to attack. Hundreds of tanks, accompanied by the sound of roaring engines, led tens of thousands of infantry to the Russian position. Chapter 325, Tear open. Quick, quick, enter the position. The German attack has begun. The frontline commander of the Russian army roared loudly. One by one, the surviving artillery holes were opened, and the Russian soldiers, like mice, got out of the hole. Driven by those low-level officers, they entered the position like cattle, preparing to resist the German attack. Although, these Russian soldiers are very clear that the Germans are very powerful. As a result of fighting the Germans, it is very likely that they were killed. However, they simply had no other choice but to bite the bullet and join the battle. The only thing that can be done, perhaps, is to pray to God and pray that they can survive on the battlefield. During the heavy shelling by the German army, the Russian army suffered a lot of losses, and the position became incomplete under the shelling of the German army. This makes their defense line less effective in battle. My god. What's that? Is that a German tank? I heard that the Northwest Front army was wiped out under the attack of the German tank troops. Can we withstand the attack of the German tank troops? The soldiers of the Russian 4th Front army undoubtedly saw the German tank unit for the first time. Many people even turned pale. In their eyes, those tanks that made rumbling noises and slowly approached them undoubtedly looked like man-eating monsters. Some Russian soldiers, under the threat of the German tank troops, were even more scared to pee their pants. Don't panic, everyone. There are anti-tank trenches in front of our defense line. German tanks cannot pass through the anti-tank trenches, so they cannot rush into our position. Russian officers comforted each other. This relieved some of the tension among the Russian soldiers. But even so, everyone's heart is very uncertain. For fear of being eaten by those dark tanks. Fire. When the German tanks were still 500 meters away from the Russian defense line, the Russian frontline commander, as if unable to bear the pressure, gave the order to fire. The remaining machine guns and mortars on the Russian army's position started firing one after another. Da-da-da. The dense machine gun bullets shot towards the German tanks like a storm. The bullets hit the armor of the tank, making a crisp and tinkling sound. However, apart from seeing sparks splashing in all directions, there are almost no other effects. Those tanks were still moving forward without any hindrance. It was the German infantry who followed the tanks. Many of them were hit and fell to the ground screaming. Destroy the Russian machine gun firepower and get rid of them. Colonel Rommel gave the order. The tanks began to slowly turn the turrets, aimed at the firepower of the Russian army, and launched an attack. Boom. A tank opened fire, and the shell of the 37mm tank gun, as if it had eyes, hit a firing Russian machine gun at once. The shell exploded, and the firepower of the Russian machine gun was blown up into the sky in an instant. Other tanks also opened fire one after another, and the machine gun fire points of the Russian army that survived the previous shelling with great difficulty were destroyed one after another under the attack of the German tanks. Boom. A Russian mortar hit a German tank. The shell hit the frontal armor of the tank. Long live. We hit the German tank. The gunners of the Russian army cheered. However, they were dumbfounded the next moment, because the German tank that was hit did not seem to be destroyed, but continued to drive. At the same time, the turret of the tank was constantly turning, as if searching for the enemy's position. Soon, the tank locked onto the target. Prepare high explosive bombs. The commander ordered. The loader inserted a high explosive round into the barrel and closed the breech block. The driver stopped immediately, and the gunner seized the moment and opened fire. Boom. With the vibration of the car body, the shells have already flown out of the barrel. In the next second, I saw that the mortar of the Russian army had been hit. Not only the mortars were destroyed, but the Russian gunners were also killed. The German tanks cannot be destroyed at all. How can we resist their attack? Seeing this scene, many Russian soldiers were beating drums in their hearts. The performance of the German tanks was so powerful that they couldn't resist at all. Even the firm confidence of some Russian officers could not help but be shaken. The tanks of the German army opened fire while marching, pulling out the firepower points of the Russian army one by one, further reducing the threat posed by the Russian army to the German army. Soon, the German armored forces drove up to the Russian anti-tank trenches. The wide anti-tank trenches made it impossible for tanks to cross, and had to stop. The Russian army saw that their anti-tank trenches blocked the German tank troops, and they couldn't help showing a little joy on their faces. Let the trucks loaded with soil and rocks of the engineers behind come up immediately and fill in a road. Other tanks, Continue to attack and prevent the Russians from interfering with our engineering operations, Colonel Rommel ordered. 10 minutes later, more than a dozen trucks loaded with earth and rocks, and 2 bulldozers converted from tanksites arrived on the battlefield. The truck dumped the earth and rocks on the edge of the Russian anti-tank trenches, and then the bulldozers pushed the earth and rocks into the Russian anti-tank trenches to fill in a passage. The officers and soldiers of the Russian army were dumbfounded after seeing the actions of the German army. If the anti-tank trenches are filled, how can they be used as German tanks? At that time, their defense line will be easily torn apart by German tanks. Stop the Germans. Stop them quickly. You must not let them fill up the anti-tank trenches. Otherwise, we will be finished. A Russian officer yelled in horror. The Russian army used mortars and heavy machine guns to open fire on the working German engineers. It's just that they were attacked by German tanks as soon as they opened fire. Apart from destroying a few German trucks and killing some engineers, there was no other effect. In less than 20 minutes, the German engineers filled in 2 passages on the Russian anti-tank trenches. One after another tanks, through these 2 passages, rushed towards the Russian defense line 100 meters away, preparing to tear the Russian defense line apart and completely defeat them. God, how can we resist the Germans? The Russian officers and soldiers who saw this scene exclaimed. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.